Chapter 984. A dragon turtle with a terrifying aura, on the other hand, appeared to be extremely frightened and anxious from the beginning to the end. Lin Sun wouldn't have believed it if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. After standing there in a daze for a while, Lin Sun finally accepted the fact. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The successor of the old crazy? Could it have mistaken me for someone else? Lin Sun thought of something and couldn't help frowning. He had never taken anyone as his master since he started his cultivation. He had been exploring the Tao alone. If he had a master, it would be Master Lu. But Lin Sun didn't think Master Lu was a old crazy. After thinking about it, Lin Sun came to a conclusion. The reason why the dragon turtle misunderstood him was either related to the heaven accessing place, or the fight saint technique he cultivated, or it was related to the inheritance of Green Parasol Mountain. Otherwise, he couldn't explain what he had experienced. Master, hurry up! The pure soul source is in the star remnant meteorite. Silver was extremely excited in his sea of consciousness. Lin Sun didn't have time to think about it anymore. He looked at the star remains meteorite with a hole in it. At the same time, the giant silver bear and the dragon turtle met up. Both of them were still in a state of shock. How was it? That guy didn't make things difficult for you, did he? The giant silver bear asked. No, but I was scared. The dragon turtle's voice was low and trembling. It's true. The old monster who devoured countless galaxies in the ancient times has a successor in the ancient desolation realm. So, I wonder what Miss will think when she wakes up. The giant silver bear sighed. Let's go. I don't want to stay in this damn place. I can't help being scared when I feel that aura. The dragon turtle carried the ice coffin on its back and rushed to the top of the lake as it spoke. By the way, where's the star soul source? The giant silver bear shouted. Oh no, I forgot about it! The dragon turtle screamed. What should we do? Forget it. Let's go. Miss will wake up sooner or later even without it, the giant silver bear sighed. The two ferocious beasts immediately rushed to the surface of the lake. Rumble from the outside. Since Lin Sun's figure entered the silver lake, the originally tranquil lake water was broken, setting off stormy waves and rumbling sounds. His momentum was terrifying. The experts who had been watching all of this were visibly moved, and the same thought emerged in their hearts at the same time, that youngsters shouldn't be fighting fiercely with the dragon turtle, right? When they thought up to here, many experts were instantly unable to restrain themselves. Especially some half-step King Realm experts who felt they possessed formidable strengths. They'd started to make a move successively. They walked out from the nearby islands and quickly approached the lakeside, thinking that this was an excellent opportunity. Perhaps they could be the fisherman who benefits from the fight between the sandpiper and the clam. In the blink of an eye, over 10 half-step King Realm experts had flashed out, and they were distributed in the surroundings of the Silver Lake and were investigating everything that occurred within it. They were very vigilant and did not act rashly. Miss Lu, the situation doesn't look good. Child Lin Sun. Ko Xing and others were nervous and found the situation strange. He'll be fine. At most, young Master Lin will return in defeat. If he wants to stay alive, I'm afraid that even the old monsters of the King Realm won't be able to trap him. Miss Li's expression was calm. In fact, she was also a little unsure. The violent fluctuations produced by the Silver Lake were so intense that it was impossible to see what was happening under the lake from the outside. This made it impossible for Miss Lu to judge Lin Sun's safety. However, she was very sure that with the ability Lin Sun had shown along the way, a dragon turtle shouldn't pose a fatal threat to him as long as it wasn't an old monster of the King Realm who had set foot on the road to immortality. Rumble. It didn't take long for the whole Silver Lake to tumble, with silver waves rushing up like a volcanic eruption. The place was turbulent. This made the experts near the lake a little restless. All these signs undoubtedly indicated that a fierce battle was likely to take place at the bottom of the lake. This was the best time to seize the opportunity. Whoosh! Suddenly, a half-step King Realm expert was the first to make a move. He took out a purple spiritual sword, broke the surface of the silver lake, and suddenly disappeared. Let's go. Let's take action too. Seeing this, the other half-step King Realm experts couldn't sit still and started to take action one after another. They'd already clearly investigated a few days ago, and an enormous meteor that was the size of a mountain lay silent at the bottom of the lake. It was surely an unprecedented fortune, and no one was willing to miss it at a time like this. Whoosh! Whoosh! For a time, the figures of the half-step King Realm experts disappeared under the lake one after another. Hurry up! Hurry up! If we're a step late, we won't even be able to drink the soup, let alone eat the meat. At the same time, the reincarnation developing realm experts couldn't help but want a share of the soup. It was a huge meteorite. Even if it was cut off, it would be enough for them to share. In addition, they also suspected that there should be other meteorites at the bottom of the lake in addition to this huge meteorite. However, just as they approached the lake, a shrill scream suddenly sounded from the lake. Then, under the shocked gazes of the crowd, the body of a half-step King Realm expert was thrown out of the lake. Like a kite with a broken string, he flew hundreds of meters high into the sky. Blood spurted out of his mouth and nose, his chest collapsed, and his arms were twisted like fried dough twists. Obviously, he had suffered an extremely terrifying injury. This, the reincarnation developing realm cultivators were shocked. What was going on? They had just started and a half-step King Realm expert was already in danger? Suddenly, another miserable shrill cry resounded, and another half-step King Realm expert was blasted flying like a pig being slaughtered. This person was even worse. Half of his body was smashed, and there were a few deep claw marks on the other half of his body. Blood sprayed like a waterfall. Hiss! The sound of people gasping could be heard without end. The experts who hadn't entered the Silver Lake had cold hands and feet and shivered all over. That was a half-step King Realm expert. But now, in the blink of an eye, he had been beaten to such a miserable state. This was too shocking. For a moment, the way they looked at the Silver Lake changed. They couldn't help but choose to retreat far away and didn't dare to come closer. Run. This is a fucking trap. There's not only a dragon turtle at the bottom of the lake, there's also an even more terrifying white bear. Rumble. As the lake water splashed, an old man rushed out. His hair was disheveled and his face was livid. It was filled with grievance and hatred. He had also suffered serious injuries. On his back, there was a terrifying claw mark. His skin was split open, and his bones were broken. A trap? Two fierce beasts? The experts in the distance were shocked. They secretly rejoiced that they didn't take action at the first moment. Otherwise, they would have been in trouble. Sure enough, in the following period of time, half-step King Realm experts were thrown out like rubber balls. All of them were seriously injured. The shrill screams and resentful curses were heard without end. It was extremely horrifying. The experts on the lakeside were all stunned. They couldn't believe their eyes. Those were more than 10 half-step King Realm experts. How could they be defeated so quickly? What kind of terrifying ability did the two fierce beasts at the bottom of the lake have to be able to do this? Where's young Master Lin? Why haven't I seen him make an appearance? Within the king's restriction formation, Ko Xing and the others were extremely anxious, and they felt the situation was becoming more and more serious. Let's continue watching. Miss Lu frowned as well, and a wisp of worry arose in her heart. The scenes before her eyes truly caused her to have no confidence in her heart. Swoosh! Right at this moment, the lake water roiled as an enormous silver bear and a dragon turtle that covered an area of 3 kilometers charged out. As soon as the two of them appeared, the heavens and the earth dimmed while space wailed. A terrifying aura stretched out from their bodies, and it caused the experts in the surroundings to practically feel suffocated. My God! The hearts of everyone trembled, and they were practically overwhelmed with terror. Even a half-step King Realm expert wasn't a match for it and was captured and forcefully eaten like a worm. This scene seemed to be too bloody, dazzling, and horrifying. Amidst the deathly silent atmosphere, the dragon turtle suddenly raised its eyes, and it greedily swept those experts with its gaze. Everyone's bodies shivered as if they were food that had been targeted, and it caused their expressions to turn grim. Unexpectedly, the enormous silver bear slapped the dragon turtle's head and stamped with rage. Eat, eat, eat. What fucking time is it now? Leave quickly. As it spoke, it didn't even spare a glance to those experts before transforming into a snow-white flowing light that whistled towards the distant sky. At the same time, the dragon turtle shook its enormous head, and then it sighed with slight regret before turning around and leaving as well. Its enormous 3 kilometers long body was like a black cloud that covered the sky. It seemed to be moving slowly, yet it vanished without a trace in the blink of an eye. It left just like that? Everyone felt as if they were dreaming, and they felt it was even more unreal when they recalled the scenes they experienced earlier. But when they saw those half-step King Realm experts that were either dead or injured, everyone knew that everything that had occurred earlier was real. Why hasn't young Master Lin made an appearance? Ko Xing and the others felt even more uneasy in their hearts. At the same time, some experts acutely noticed this scene and cried out, "Where's that young man? Why hasn't he made an appearance since the beginning? Even if he's dead, his corpse would have floated up to the surface of the lake, right? Perhaps he was eaten by those 2 ferocious beasts." Impossible! The ripples in the lake were so great earlier, yet he didn't let out a shrill cry. How could he have possibly died? Idiot! Why care about all of this? The 2 ferocious beasts have left, so there's no longer any threat at the bottom of the lake. It wasn't long before many experts realized that perhaps this danger had occurred extremely suddenly, yet at the same time, it had undoubtedly provided them with the best opportunity. Those 2 ferocious beasts hadn't taken the enormous meteorite at the bottom of the lake with them when they left. Instantly, the breathing of many experts became hurried, and blazing greed couldn't help but surge into their hearts. Chapter 985. At the bottom of the lake, the dragon turtle had smashed a hole in the huge Star Remains meteorite, which was like a door leading to the inside of the mountain-sized Star Remains meteorite. Lin Sun was standing in it at the moment, his eyes slightly narrowed, and he was a little absent-minded. Not far from him, a fist-sized, pure and blazing starstone was shining extremely brightly. It was like a small snow-white sun, which made Lin Sun's eyes sting. According to Little Silver, this was a real star core, the life source of a star, and its value was immeasurable. And the power that Little Silver regarded as the sole source was contained in this star core. At this moment, Little Silver's grain-sized silvery white body was lying on the star core, absorbing the soul energy inside it in a nearly crazy manner. For practitioners, the value of a star core was enough to make old monsters in the Sage Realm covet it, because it could be used to refine a holy treasure. For Little Silver, the pure soul source contained in the star core could promote him to advance, transform himself, and enter the next stage of evolution. When he reached this stage, he could cast off the shackles of his body and show his human form. Crack, crack. Tiny gnawing sounds kept ringing out. Little Silver's appearance at the moment could be described as extremely hungry, as if he had an irreconcilable hatred for the star core, which was too crazy. Even Lin Sun couldn't bear to see his greedy face. If you want to refine it, then refine it. No one is going to take it from you. Why be so cruel? It's too ungentlemanly, like a greenhorn who has never seen the world. Lin Sun despised him inwardly. As he pondered, he began to look at the huge Star Remains meteorite. Strands of bright silver starlight suffused the air, while the air was enshrouded with an obscure and copious vitality energy, causing one to feel refreshed and carefree with just a single breath of it. It could be foreseen that if he cultivated here, he would get twice the result with half the effort. Lin soon carefully perceived it with his divine awareness, but to his disappointment, this star remains meteorite was as big as a mountain, but it had no special aura. He tried to cut off a piece of meteorite with the broken blade and carefully dissected it. Stone chips flew everywhere, but there was nothing inside. It can't be, right? So many half-step King Realm experts have been attracted here, and there's nothing else in this remnant meteorite other than a star core? Lin Sun didn't give up. He cut more than 10 meteorites with the broken sword, but there was no treasure in them. Looking at little silver gnawing on the star nucleus with a hungry look, Lin Sun felt very unhappy. He had exhausted all his means to get here, but in the end, he was only going to help this little guy. No, the dragon turtle was carrying a mysterious ice coffin on its back when it fled. Perhaps it was taken from this meteor. It suddenly occurred to Lin that the huge star remains meteorite was broken by the dragon turtle. Moreover, the ice coffin he took away was extremely mysterious and special. A vast and profound star diagram was branded on it, and it was not simple at all. Could it be that the real treasure contained in the star remains meteorite is that ice coffin? Lin's heart sank. If that was the case, this action would be in vain, except for getting a star core. What? Thinking of this, Lin soon suddenly noticed that there was a rectangular outline mark left on the ground, which was filled with a trace of obscure fluctuation that was difficult to detect. This made Lin soon's heart skip a beat. If the ice coffin was placed here, it would coincide with the whole outline mark. He walked forward, squatted on the ground, and carefully sensed it with his divine awareness. Immediately, he noticed something unusual. The ground was also made of star remains meteorite. As soon as his divine awareness approached it, an obscure fluctuation emerged, which blocked his divine awareness's detection. Vaguely, Lin soon seemed to feel that there was something inside the meteorite. Although it couldn't be detected, it seemed very magical. It's really weird. Lin soon's heart shook. He grasped the broken blade and carefully dissected it along the outline mark left by the ice coffin. Crack, crack, the broken blade was sharp. Stone chips flew in the air and melted into the lake water, which was hazy and blurred. As the broken blade continued to cut, it gradually extended downward, and soon, a hole with sharp edges and corners was cut out. Clatter in merely the time for a few breaths of time, when the hole had been dug to a depth of 60 centimeters, the broken blade seemed as if it had pierced through an eggshell, and a strand of multicolored and dazzling divine radiance suddenly shot out from the ground. At the same time, a clear and mellow fragrance of medicine diffused out. It was as clear as ice and as fragrant as wine, which seemed to reach the depths of the soul and make people intoxicated. Spiritual medicine? Lin soon's eyes suddenly became bright. The fragrance of the medicine was extremely pure. Just a sniff made his blood boil, and his body felt like being immersed in a hot spring, with a kind of comfortable feeling as if he was floating in the air. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down. His movements became more and more careful as he dissected the underground meteorite. Soon, a spiritual medicine appeared in front of Lin Sun. It was like a small black tree, with a stem only as thick as a thumb and a jade-like texture. There were 9 leaves hanging on its branches. Each leaf was as white as snow, shaped like a full moon, and its veins were like Taoist patterns, giving off an attractive fragrance of medicine. Its stem was like black jade, yet it had 9 leaves that were jade-white like snow. Moreover, the leaves revealed a perfect, pure, divine, and ethereal aura. It was truly too miraculous. Wisps of black and white light rain drifted from the small tree, just like yin and yang, forming a wonderful perfect cycle around it. Gulp! Lin soon couldn't help but swallow hard. Even he couldn't suppress his inner excitement, because this was an extremely rare spiritual medicine. At the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, Lin Sun once caught a psychic white ginseng, but in the end, he found that it was an old monster who had lived for countless years. However, this king herb before them was different. Even though it didn't possess intelligence, Its surging and miraculous medicinal strength revealed traces of a perfect grand Tao. This was a spiritual medicine. Moreover, it was a complete and unprecedented king herb. Its quality was extraordinary, and it was rare in the world. Even an old monster at the king realm would probably fight to the death for it. What a treasure! Lin Sun's saliva almost flowed out. He was a person who had seen a lot of things, but at this time, he lost his composure. That was because this yin-yang tree was truly too mystical. Even though he was unable to determine exactly what profound effects it possessed, there was no doubt that it was absolutely a precious treasure that was nurtured by the heavens and the earth, and it was nurtured by nature. Without any hesitation, Lin Sun dug out the yin-yang tree, together with its root. In order not to let it wither, Lin Sun also dug out the star remains and meteorites where the roots of the small tree were entrenched. It wasn't until he put the treasure into his wordless pagoda that Lin Sun showed a satisfied smile. If he hadn't sensed that something was amiss, he would have missed this king herb by a hair's breadth. That ice coffin covers this spiritual medicine. Could it be that there is some kind of creature hiding in the ice coffin, and it wants to cultivate with the help of this spiritual medicine? Lin Sun was lost in thought. Then, he didn't waste any time and continued to dig. Little Silver, who was gnawing on a star core, was stupefied. Master was too crazy. Then Little Silver gritted his teeth, as if he was not convinced, and gnawed at the star nuclei faster and faster. The faces of the man and the insect at the moment could be described as vicious and evil. If other practitioners saw this, they wouldn't know what to think. Good treasure! It wasn't long before Lin Sun dug out another spiritual medicine, which made his eyes shine brightly. This spiritual medicine was as red as sunset, as if it was burning. It was only the size of a palm, and its stem and leaves were slender, as if carved out of fire jade. Looking closely, this grass contained natural strange veins. Lin Sun carefully identified them and was surprised to find that those strange veins were imprinted with the mystery of the Great Way of Fire. This made him more aware of the extraordinariness of this medicine. Then, the flame grass was also put away by Lin Sun. Next, he became more and more energetic. He rubbed his palms and continued to dig on the ground. The range of the pit continued to expand, and inch by inch, the stone chips were cut into powder and disappeared in the lake. There are more. It wasn't long before Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp. Another spiritual medicine was dug out. This was a golden poria cocos, which was as smooth as mutton fat and sprinkled wisps of golden light rain. Whoosh! But at this moment, a stream of light swept over. It was a dark blue arrow, dazzling and entwined with terrible thunder. Lin Sun reached out and grabbed the arrow. His palm was filled with the power of star obliteration devouring way, which silently dissolved the terrible penetrating force of the arrow. At the same time, Lin Sun also found the attacker. It was a golden-robed man bathed in dark blue thunder and lightning, who was rushing over from the lake in the distance. He held a white bone bow in his hand, and his breath was extremely frightening. "My friend, this place is occupied by me. I'll give you a chance. Get out of my sight now," the golden-robed man said coldly and domineeringly. As he spoke, he glanced at the golden poria cocos and didn't hide his strong desire to possess it. "Are you from the Thunderwing clan?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and asked. "You have a good eyesight. Since you know my origin, why don't you get out of here?" The golden-robed man's voice was not loud, but it was extremely arrogant and domineering. He was slender and handsome, with a pair of wind and thunder wings entwined with dark blue electric arcs on his back, which made him look like a thunder spirit. "Ho ho, like master, like servant." Lin Sun laughed. He had already guessed the identity of the man. Xing Yitian, the leader of the young generation of the Thunderwing clan, who had received personal guidance from a sage. He was like the overlord of thunder and was very famous in the Dongxing territory. This was the news that Miss Lo had told Lin Sun, so he guessed it immediately. What? Xing Etian was stunned, and then his face darkened. His eyes burst with lightning. My servant was killed by you? Chapter 986. Lin Sun said casually, he was courting death and then he died. You better not learn from him. Xing Etian smiled. His smile was cold and terrifying. Courting death? I think you really are tired of living. You killed my people and still dare to speak rudely. You really are arrogant. His tone wasn't loud, but there was a copious amount of murderous intent surging out. His thunderstorm wings were flowing with dark blue electric arcs, giving off a terrifying aura. At this time, many figures appeared at the bottom of the lake. When they saw this scene, their hearts trembled. They didn't come closer and chose to watch from afar. At the same time, they also noticed the golden poria that had just been dug up. Their gazes changed. Sure enough, there was a fortune hidden in this giant meteorite. Young master, hurry up and kill him. If more people come, it will be troublesome. Some young men and women approached. All of them had powerful auras and terrifying gazes. Looking at their demeanor, they were Xing Etian's servants. That's fine. You guys keep an eye on the others. I will kill this madman. Xing Etian spoke as if he was talking about something insignificant. He raised the white bone bow in his hand and placed a blue lightning arrow on the bowstring. With a light pull, the lake water rumbled. After that, a terrifying fluctuation surged and transformed into the silhouette of a thunder spirit. Hiss! Everyone gasped. They stared at the bow. The bowstring was blue like flowing light. Dense runes appeared on it. It was incomparably mystical. The shadow of the thunder spirit was formed by these runes. It stood proudly in the air. The water in the lake retreated. It was more than 30 meters tall. Lightning surged around it as it protected Xing Etian. This scene was too terrifying. Everyone realized that this bow had an extraordinary origin. It was most likely a miraculous ancient treasure. That was why it could display such power. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. His entire body shone brightly. He didn't dare to be careless. The aura Xing Etian emitted was comparable to Yu Lingkong and Shun Baixian. Just as Miss Lu said, this person was extraordinary. In the blink of an eye, Xing Etian pulled back the bowstring and drew it into the shape of a full moon. His aura grew stronger and stronger, and the sound of wind and thunder could be heard. The thunder spirit suddenly looked up, looking down at Lin Sun. Boom! A dazzling dark blue arrow shot out, breaking through the limit, its vicious might overflowing into the heavens. Lin Sun's black pupils suddenly shrank, and he dodged to one side. The bow and arrow was a great killing weapon. Although it was not a holy treasure, its power was terrible. At the same time that he dodged, he'd already put away the golden poria on the ground. Otherwise, it was bound to be destroyed by this arrow. Boom! When a terrifying explosion resounded, the dark blue arrow had already arrived, and it caused space to explode into pieces while wind and lightning raged, and it gave rise to waves that shot into the sky. Crack! The huge star remnant meteorite exploded into pieces, and this was only because it was swept by the might of this arrow. The dark blue arrow had already rushed towards Lin Sun. The strange thing was that it seemed to have a mind of its own. No matter how Lin Sun dodged, it would not let go. Seeing this, Lin Sun's eyes flashed, and his spine swayed like a dragon. He opened his fist, and a bright fist force broke out to meet the arrow. Boom! The two collided, causing divine radiance to surge and shoot towards the surroundings, and it caused a great explosion to occur here. Wind and lightning surged like the tide, and in the end, the force of the fist exploded into pieces and transformed into a rain of light. The arrow was also shattered, and it let out a buzzing sound as it swiftly returned to Xing Etian's hand. In the distance, everyone was shocked. This arrow was so amazing and terrifying, and if it were them, they would not be able to block it. But now, this young man was able to resolve this attack with his bare hands. Interesting. Lin Sun's right hand's fingers were numb, and he felt a dull pain in his bones. This surprised him greatly. He became more and more aware that the bow in Xing Etien's hand had a great origin, and he didn't look down on it. "Oh, blocking an arrow with your bare hands? Unfortunately, I only used 30% of my strength in this arrow. I'd like to see if you can still block it next." Xing Etienne sneered with a sense of arrogance and disdain. The people in the distance were horrified. Xing Etienne was indeed as overbearing and arrogant as the legends said. If the arrow just now really only used 30% of its power, then how terrifying would it be if he used all of his strength? Boom! Wind and lightning surged, and the dark blue arrow swept out again, stirring up a terrifying wind of thunder. The electric arc was dazzling, and it submerged the entire area. This arrow was imbued with the power of the Great Way, and it was indeed much stronger than before. Looking from afar, it was like a bolt of thunder crossing the void. If it was an ordinary reincarnation developing realm cultivator, he would definitely be smashed into pieces by this arrow. How could anyone resist this? "Open!" Lin Sun shouted in a low voice. His fist force was ancient and vast, and it was earth-shattering, deducing the essence of the 9 strikes for shaking heaven. The void suddenly collapsed, and the fist force was like a symbol of the Great Way, showing a primitive aura, blocking this arrow. Boom! The place was roaring, and the bottom of the lake was in chaos, like a pot of boiling water. Finally, this arrow was also blocked, and its power was dissolved. But when Lin Sun wanted to imprison this arrow, it flashed strangely and returned to Xing Etienne's hand again. Good arrow! Lin Sun stood there, and he roughly judged that the power of this arrow was comparable to his own blue arrow. At the same time, Xing Etienne's expression changed slightly. The first time it was dissolved might have been a coincidence, but the second time it was also dissolved, which was not simple. In the past, with this pair of bow and arrows, he had killed a real half-step king realm existence. This was also the reason why he dared to come to this Silver Lake. Even if there was a group of half-step king realm opponents, he was not afraid. But now, he couldn't see through Lin Sun. "You have set foot on the extreme way?" Xing Etienne frowned. "Don't talk nonsense. If you have the ability, then continue. If not, then wait to be killed." Lin Sun smiled. Xing Etienne's eyes were cold. He had already entered the extreme way, so he knew very well how difficult it was to deal with an opponent with such a background. "Are you in a hurry to die? Okay, then I will fulfill your wish." His expression was cold, and his body was surging with lightning, and his long hair was dancing. Buzz! The bowstring roared violently, and with a loud shout, he shot the third arrow. The power of this arrow was different again. There was a vague ancient sound, which shook the lake to the verge of collapse. Lin Sun's heart trembled, and his whole body shone, deducing the mystery of star-devouring heaven way, which made his whole body seem to turn into an unfathomable abyss. At the same time, the momentum of his fist suddenly changed. This was the star-devouring heaven way, which had reached the level of Tao. Its power was immeasurable, and it had the power to swallow the world. This, Xing Etienne was shocked. The power displayed by Lin Sun was beyond his imagination. Especially at this moment, Lin Sun's whole body was filled with the power of Tao, which made his heart palpitate. What kind of Tao was this? Boom! The fist force roared, bursting with boundless light, like a black hole in the void, and swallowed the arrow. Everyone saw that the invincible arrow was blocked inch by inch, and its power was annihilated and swallowed. When it reached Lin Sun's fist, it was no longer a deterrent. Bang! But the fist force was still there, and the blue arrow wailed and trembled violently. Everyone's scalp was numb. Without the help of any treasures, Lin Sun shook Xing Etienne's fatal arrow 3 times in a row. This was incredible! At the same time, Xing Etienne's face changed. Without hesitation, he called back the arrow, pulled the bow to the fullest, and shot with all his strength. Boom! At this moment, the Thunder Spirit also moved, and together with the blue arrow, it attacked Lin Sun. There was no doubt that this was Xing Etienne's strongest attack. Many practitioners were so shocked that they retreated again and again. They didn't dare to get close, for fear of being affected. The bottom of the Silver Lake was completely chaotic. It was full of destructive thunder, as if a lightning tribulation had descended here. "I'd like to see how you block this arrow," Xing Etienne shouted, and his voice was like a thunderclap, extremely overbearing. It had to be said that this attack was really abnormal, and it made Lin Sun feel a kind of unprecedented pressure. He took a deep breath and punched again. Without holding back, he punched again. Buzz! In an instant, the originally turbulent and chaotic lake suddenly became still, as if it was frozen. An indescribably vast aura burst out from the surface of Lin Sun's fist. What kind of punch was this? Like the sea, it could accommodate all the currents in the world. It also had an invincible power. As soon as it was punched, it seemed to be able to penetrate time and space, and it was immortal. This was the power of the Tao. This punch elaborated the essence of the Tao of water, and it deduced the supreme power of this Tao. This was also Lin Sun's intention to test the power of the Tao, and he hadn't used it before. Boom! The entire Silver Lake seemed to be unable to bear this kind of pressure, and it suddenly exploded. The surging lake water rushed into the sky, and the nearby islands and reefs also suffered, collapsing and sinking. Miss Lu and the others who were hiding in the King's Forbidden Formation were shocked, as if they were witnessing a catastrophe in front of them. At the same time, at the bottom of the lake, the Thunder Spirit didn't even have time to show its power before its body was blasted into pieces by the punch, and it collapsed into a rain of light. And the blue arrow was smashed, and it let out a violent wail. Puff! Xing Etienne suffered a backlash, and his mind was in pain. He couldn't help but cough up a mouthful of blood, and his face had completely changed. The power of the Tao. How could this be possible? Wasn't this the power of the Tao that only the King realm could comprehend and control? He was shocked, and he looked at Lin Sun as if he was looking at a monster that couldn't be measured by common sense. "You take a move from me!" Lin Sun rushed over explosively. His aura had changed, and he revealed his ability. He was like a peerless immortal sword that had attacked, and he had the charm of killing and destroying everything. This was the embodiment of the Tao. There was nothing in the world that was more pliable than water, and no one could be strong when attacking. The first half of the sentence meant that there was nothing that could be tolerated, and all rivers ran into the sea. The second half was the way of attacking and killing, and it could destroy mountains, rivers, and the universe. There was a sage in ancient times that said, "Kindness is like water." Xing Etienne was very strong, and he far surpassed his peers. He was famous in Dongxing domain, but when he faced Lin Sun who was rushing over, he felt unprecedented pressure, and he almost suffocated. His heart shook, and he quickly dodged, but he was still swept by the wind from Lin Sun's fist. Bang! His body flew out fiercely as if he was hit by a mountain. During this process, the bones and tendons all over his body were cracking, and they emitted sounds of friction. Moreover, his 7 apertures were bleeding, and his soul showed signs of collapsing. In an instant, he couldn't help but let out a scream, and his handsome face became distorted and hideous, stained with blood, and it was extremely horrifying. Chapter 987. With a bang, Xing Etienne fell to the ground in a sorry state. Blood flowed from his 7 apertures, making his handsome face look particularly hideous and terrifying. Everyone was shocked. Even someone as powerful as Xing Etienne was defeated. There was no doubt that his opponent was also a peerless genius. "You actually injured me." Xing Etienne seemed to be in disbelief, and then he was completely furious. Boom! The wings behind him spread out, and blue arcs of lightning flowed like dragons and snakes formed from lightning. They rushed towards Lin Sun, and the sound of thunder frightened the souls of people. He was completely furious. He was a peerless figure himself, and at a young age, he had already set foot on the top. He had once been personally taught by a saint, so he had never suffered such a great loss. "Give me your life!" he roared and pulled the bowstring. With a buzzing sound, a resplendent phantom of a thunder spirit emerged, like a divine mountain descending from the sky. His face was livid and twisted. Being defeated like this was a great humiliation to him. If this was spread out, it would be too shameful. Buzz. The moment the bowstring was released, a dazzling blue divine rainbow swept out. It was more than 30 meters long, and it was surrounded by wind and thunder Taoist patterns. At the same time, the thunder spirit also moved. It spat out a snow-white light from its mouth, and it was extremely sharp like a blade cutting through the void. Lin Sun's body was surging with the breath of the Tao of water. The spirit in his body was roaring, and he deduced his Taoism to the peak level. His whole body seemed to have turned into a vast ocean, and he had a kind of boundless spirit that could accommodate thousands of streams. It was amazing, and during this process, he suddenly changed his fist into a palm, and a strange palm print condensed in the void. A black divine flame spread out, and a black phoenix emerged, emitting the divine light of extinction. Black Phoenix Annihilation. It was an ancient Taoism that once had a peerless reputation in the ancient times. It had the power to extinguish all spirits and destroy all Taoism. It could be called the first-class Taoism in the world. This was the Taoism that Lin Sun had been studying in the past few days, and it came from the scripture of tranquility. Lin Sun didn't need to explore it by himself at all. With the explanation and guidance of the Black Phoenix, he now had a preliminary understanding of the mystery of this Taoism. The Black Phoenix coiled about, its wings scattering out nirvanic divine flames. This arrow was mysterious and terrifying. However, this arrow was incredibly powerful. It was an attack from Xing Etienne's rage, so its power was also incomparable. It immediately tore apart the Black Phoenix's divine flame of extinction, turning it into a rain of light. This moved Lin Sun. He realized that the power of the arrow had been completely awakened, which was why it had become so powerful. But this was exactly what Lin Sun wanted. He moved his hands and deduced the essence of Black Phoenix extinguishing skill, using it to polish and temper himself. Rumble. This place was in turmoil. The silver lake was completely evaporated. The ground was dry and cracked. The spectating practitioners had already taken this chance to retreat far away. "It's Brother Lin!" He shouted excitedly in the king's forbidden formation far away from the lake. "Young Master Lin is fine, but who is his opponent? How could he be so strong?" Ko Xing and the others were pleasantly surprised at first, but then their expressions turned serious as they realized how terrifying Xing Etienne was. "It really is Xing Etienne." Miss Li's clear eyes narrowed as she revealed a look of realization. Boom! In the void, the thunder spirit roared angrily as if it was a real existence. It carried a thunder hammer and struck down, causing the Black Phoenix's shadow to dim and eventually disappear. At the same time, the blue arrow shot straight to Lin Sun with fierce power and dazzling electric arc. Lin Sun sighed inwardly. He had only scratched the surface of Black Phoenix extinguishing skill and could only use less than 1/10 of its power. Otherwise, it would not have been broken so easily. Buzz. Immediately, the momentum around his body changed. Magnificent black Buddha light flowed around his body, making him look solemn like a Buddha descending to the mortal world. In a trance, everyone felt that at this moment, Lin Sun seemed to be one with heaven and earth, resonating with them. Buddhist chants resounded around him like thunder. This was the inheritance of earth scripture of Ksitigarbha Temple. Boom! He pressed his palm down, and a black Buddhist seal condensed in the void. Suddenly, an indestructible, all-destroying great King Kong and great wisdom filled the world, as if it could even collapse the space. Inheritance of Ksitigarbha Temple? Miss Lu was stunned. She suddenly realized that in that ancient temple, Besides the Black Phoenix extinguishing skill, Lin Sun might have obtained a lot of opportunities. What surprised her the most was that both the Black Phoenix extinguishing skill and the inheritance of Ksitigarbha Temple had extremely harsh requirements and restrictions for practitioners. Like the former, it was almost impossible for practitioners who had not awakened the immortal Phoenix bloodline. But with Lin Sun, this restriction seemed to have been broken. Bang, 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 the Buddha seal flew across the sky and collided with the blue arrow, shaking it and producing a buzzing sound. Finally, it was defeated, its wail shocking the 9 heavens. How is this possible? Xing Etian was furious and extremely shocked. This time, he did not hold back and attacked with all his strength, but it was still broken. With a swoosh, Lin Sun rushed over. In the void, wherever he passed, black lotus seats bloomed one after another. The divine light was dense and the Buddha light was floating. One step, one lotus. Like the legendary Buddha crossing the void, wherever he passed, the lotus seats reflected each other and the Buddha light shone. Xing Etian finally realized that this time he had encountered a difficult problem. His opponent's strength had once again exceeded his expectations. "I'll kill you next time." He felt uneasy. Although he felt extremely humiliated, he decided to retreat. Although he was overbearing and conceited, he was not a reckless person. At this moment, he became extremely vigilant and realized that the situation was not good. Buzz, he flapped his thunderstorm wings and turned to leave. But Lin Sun was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already rushed up and pressed down with his palm. This palm had the charm of overcoming misfortune and the aura of destruction. Xing Etian sensed that something was wrong. Without hesitation, he drew his bow and shot out an arrow. There was an earth-shattering explosion. Lin Sun's palm was defeated, but at the same time, an ice dragon soared into the sky like a snow-white dragon and swung its tail in the void. Puff! Xing Etian's entire body was sent flying. Who knew how many bones in his body were broken and blood gushed out like a fountain? There was dead silence, not a single sound could be heard. How could someone as overbearing as Xing Etian be suppressed just like that? This was almost unbelievable. At this point, there was no more suspense in this battle. Although Xing Etian's servants saw that the situation was not good and rushed to help, it was too late. After dozens of moves, Xing Etian let out a scream. His life was almost released by Lin Sun's hidden earth method. He was seriously injured and on the verge of death. Clang! At the same time, Lin Sun finally seized the opportunity and firmly grasped the blue arrow. But this arrow seemed to have a mind of its own and was unwilling to be captured. It produced a terrible struggle that was even more terrible than Xing Etian's strength. Caught off guard, Lin Sun's fingers were almost broken. Lin Sun was shocked. Without hesitation, he suppressed the arrow into the wordless pagoda. Even so, the arrow broke free from the suppression of the golden Tao light and went on a rampage in the pagoda. It was extremely magical. Idiot, this arrow is an ancient divine object. Not to mention you, even the old monsters of the King realm can't suppress it. Just wait for your doom. Although Xing Etian was seriously injured, he couldn't help but sneer when he saw this scene. He knew the power of this arrow too well. In ancient times it had shot through the sun in the sky. It was terrifying beyond compare. Anyone who wanted to suppress it would suffer from its backfire. Really? Lin Sun's lips curled up inexplicably. As soon as he thought of it, insignificant Bao appeared in the wordless pagoda. The Bao, which seemed to be made of white bones and skulls, exuded an obscure and cold breath. Just for a moment the blue arrow stopped abruptly, as if it was frightened. It buzzed and trembled. Suddenly, Lin Sun felt relaxed and couldn't help marveling that only insignificant Bao could suppress this arrow. It could be imagined how magical it was. At the same time, Xing Etian spat out a mouthful of blood with a sharp pain in his mind. He was keenly aware that his connection with the blue arrow was cut off. How could it be? He was so shocked that he almost collapsed. The reason why he was able to use this arrow was because a saint had planted a mysterious mark in his body. But now, this mark had been shattered. Die! Lin Sun rushed over without hesitation. But before he could get close, Xing Etienne's body suddenly exploded with a terrifying golden light. In the next moment, he disappeared into thin air. Golden cicada talisman. Lin Sun frowned. Such a person is like a dragon in the sky. It's easy to defeat him, but difficult to kill him. Miss Lu sighed in her heart. She had already expected this. Xing Etienne was the leader of the young generation of Thunder Wing clan. He was entrusted with the high hopes of the whole clan. If he was so easy to kill, he would have been killed by the enemy forces of Thunder Wing clan. This kind of thing had happened in the past. Some clans hated each other so much that they couldn't wait to exterminate the younger generation of each other in order to use the foundation of each other's forces. Because there were too many similar cases, people like Xing Etienne were absolutely protected by Thunder Wing clan. They couldn't let any accident happen to him. Wait and see. Sooner or later, I will kill you with my own hands. Although Xing Etienne left, his resentful and angry shout echoed in the void. It's time to find a way to solve this kind of thing, Lin Sun said to himself. He had encountered similar things many times since he started his cultivation. His opponents always used various means to get out of trouble at the last moment, such as Yu Lingkong and Xing Etienne in front of him. Lin Sun was very clear that as long as Xing Etienne was alive, he was destined to be a hidden danger. If similar things happened in the future, there would only be more and more trouble. If I can step into the king realm, I won't be afraid of all this. But before that, it's extremely troublesome to prevent him from escaping. Unless I expose the power of insignificant Bao and wordless pagoda, I can't completely suppress him with other forces. Lin Sun also knew that people like Xing Etienne had many trump cards. Even without golden cicada talisman, he would have other ways to escape. As Miss Lu said before, it was too difficult to kill a peerless figure from a big force. Without thinking much, Lin Sun looked at the young boys and girls not far away. They were Xing Etienne's servants. Chapter 988. After Xing Etienne escaped, the servants' fighting spirit had already collapsed. Seeing that the situation was bad, they all fled for their lives. Lin Sun didn't hold back. He used the ice dragon steps to chase after them. Screams sounded out continuously. After a while, all the servants were killed. But this still made Lin Sun feel a little depressed. Xing Etienne didn't die, so killing these servants didn't give him any sense of accomplishment. But even so, the people in the distance were still shocked. Xing Etienne was a powerful figure in the younger generation of Dongxing world. He had a great reputation, but in the end, he was easily suppressed by this young man. What, are you still waiting to seize the treasure? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold as he glanced at the people in the distance. He didn't hide his killing intent at all. Previously, he was digging for the king herbs at the bottom of the lake. He was very happy, but Xing Etienne and these fellows ruined it. This made him very unhappy. Crash, the faces of those practitioners changed, and most of them fled. After seeing the fierce battle just now, they had already realized how terrifying Lin Sun was. Who dared to provoke him now? Even some half-step king realms revealed a look of fear. Although they felt embarrassed to be threatened by a junior, they still endured it in the end. It couldn't be helped. They were very clear that such a young man had already set foot on the path of cultivation and had the ability to cross realms to fight with them. At this time, the entire Silver Lake had been destroyed. The bottom of the lake had cracked and dried up. The huge meteorite had also been destroyed in the battle. Lin Sun could only feel sorry for this. Fortunately, he had already dug out the 3 miraculous king herbs, Yin-Yang tree, flame grass and golden fulling. Moreover, Little Silver had obtained a star core that could help him advance. This operation could be considered a great harvest. However, just as Lin Sun was about to leave this place, a terrifying aura suddenly appeared in the distance and swept towards him. "Young man, did you take the opportunity at the bottom of the lake?" It was an old man with dark green hair and a haggard face. Although he was in human form, he wasn't human. There was a jade-white horn on his forehead, and it was an entire 30 centimeters long. Moreover, his pupils were amber in color and surged with a strange glow. Old freak Emoshi. Some of the experts that hadn't retreated yet instantly cried out involuntarily when they saw this, and they'd recognized the withered old man. On the other side of the Realm River was the ancient Azure continent that belonged to the East Victory domain. It was a vast place with many cultivation forces. Among them, the most famous was the Heaven's Pivot Sacred Ground. On the other hand, Old Freak Inc. She was from the Azure Prefecture as well, and his cultivation had broken through into the King Realm over 10 years ago, so he could be considered as a new king. This old freak wasn't simple at all. He had a wild and ruthless disposition, and he'd killed many cultivators in the past and formed many blood enmity with them. After he attained the immortal king realm, he'd restrained himself greatly instead, and he'd taken the initiative to approach the Heaven's Pivot divine grounds with the intention of entering this sect and choosing a place for himself. A king realm expert taking the initiative to surrender was naturally an extremely sensational event. It caused an uproar in the ancient Song province. It was said that the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land had already expressed that they planned to take Mo-Shi into their orthodoxy in the near future. So, when they saw old freak Mo-Shi make an appearance here at this moment, all the experts in the surroundings couldn't help but be shocked and reveal extreme fear. That was a real king realm expert. The heavens and the earth dimmed while the atmosphere was oppressive, and it was enveloped by a terrifying king realm pressure. As soon as old freak Mo-Shi appeared, his pair of enchanting eyes locked onto Lin Sun, and his power was unfathomable, causing others to feel suffocated. "This kid is going to be out of luck," those experts muttered to themselves, and they couldn't help but take pleasure in Lin Sun's misfortune. Once a king realm expert made an appearance, the outcome was already predetermined. How could this be? Ko Xing and the others felt a chill run down their spines. How could they have imagined that a real king realm expert would appear at the last moment? The king realm was above the 5 realms, and it was a terrifying existence that stood at the peak of the world. Even though old freak Mo-Shi was a new king and his foundation in the king realm was still very shallow, he was a real king after all, and a half-step king realm expert couldn't compare to him. "Hand over the treasure and I'll let you leave, otherwise you'll definitely die." Old freak Mo-Shi's voice was very flat, and he seemed to regard Lin Sun as an ant. At his level, he indeed had no need to fear a young man at the reincarnation developing realm. "Oh, what high-sounding sentiments! Are you sure you want to go against me?" Unexpectedly, Lin Sun wasn't afraid in the slightest at this moment, and his expression was composed as well. His display was extraordinary. This caused others to have no choice but to sigh with emotion. An expert that's capable of stepping foot onto the peak really isn't someone that can be deterred at will. Merely this boldness isn't something that just anyone can possess. Old freak Mo-Shi was surprised, and then he revealed a disdainful smile. "Young man, do you know what the king realm is? It's that no matter who you are or how great your background is, if you go against me, then I'll still kill you." Bang! As he spoke, the aura around his body shot into the sky and dispersed the layer of clouds, causing the nearby space to wail and collapse inch by inch. The pressure of the king realm was simply terrifying to the extreme. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun endured unimaginable pressure as well, and it caused him to have no choice but to circulate his cultivation with all his might to resist it. He's actually able to resist it? Old freak Mo-Shi was stunned once more. In the past, he only had to release some pressure to make his opponents below the king realm kneel. Yet now, he was only a young man at the reincarnation evolution realm, yet he actually wasn't deterred, and this seemed to be extremely unusual. Humph. No wonder you're so arrogant. So it turns out that you're a genius. But in my opinion, geniuses are only able to rule supreme in the reincarnation evolution realm, and they haven't truly risen to prominence in the end. They're like meat on a chopping board, and their lives are at my mercy. Old freak Mo, she grunted coldly like a thunderclap that resounded through the heavens and the earth, and it shook the ears of those experts in the distance to the point their ears droned while their vital blood roiled, and they almost fell limply to the ground. His aura grew even stronger, and he was like a king that looked down upon the world with a pressure that could crush mountains and rivers. The pressure Lin soon felt had multiplied as well. However, he wasn't afraid in his heart, and he was carefully experiencing it instead. In the past, he'd once been targeted by King Realm experts, and it was even to the extent that he'd been pursued by 2 King Realm experts of the Black Nightmare Dog clan. At that time, he didn't have the strength to resist them at all, and he didn't even possess the ability to resist them. He could only control the vast universe arc and flee in a sorry state. Yet it was different now. At the very least, he possessed the ability to not be deterred before a King Realm expert. The chi around his body hadn't been suppressed, and his soul and body still had the ability to struggle and resist, and he hadn't lost the power to move. This was a kind of progress, and it was a great one. A King Realm expert like you is just SOSO. At this moment, Lin Sun smiled with a confident look. He also knew that old freak Mo, she had just become a King Realm expert for more than 10 years, and his foundation and strength in the King Realm were much worse than that of other King Realm experts of the older generation. But no matter what, he was a king. Now that he could resolve and resist old freak Mo Shi's pressure, Lin Sun was very excited and satisfied. All the people present gasped. They didn't expect that Lin Sun would still be so tough in such a bad situation. But old freak Mo Shi's expression was cold, and his eyebrows were filled with a touch of dense killing intent. There are always rumors in this world that a great era is coming, and the talents of the younger generation will rise and lead the trend of the ancient desolation in the future. But in my opinion, it's ridiculous. If it's true, what are we King Realm experts? As old freak Mo Shi spoke, he stepped forward. As soon as he stepped out, the world roared and the great way resonated. Some strong people felt as if their hearts had been struck by lightning, and they were so uncomfortable that they almost coughed up blood. I'm not afraid to tell you that even if a great era comes, only the King Realm experts like us can really dominate the world if the sages don't come out. Now, I'll prove with facts that you're just a stronger nonentity in front of me, and I can crush you to death at will. Speaking of this, old freak Mo Shi stretched out his hand and grasped. An invisible big handprint appeared in the air and grasped towards Lin Sun fiercely. The power of the big handprint was too terrible. The sound of Tao roared and the light of Tao burst out. The knuckles were filled with the texture of the Great Way, and there was the aura of the law lingering in them. Looking from a distance, those strong people had a sense of despair, as if doomsday was coming. This was the King Realm. In everyone's opinion, Lin Sun had no hope of escaping at all and was destined to be crushed to death like a bug. However, the scene that unfolded next caused everyone to be flabbergasted, and their jaws almost fell off. Boom! In Lin Sun's palm, a small mutton fat bottle several inches high swept out and suddenly sprayed out divine flames all over the sky. Wood green flame, gold white flame, clean water black flame, earth pole yellow flame, sun red flame. 5 kinds of divine flames turned into colorful and dazzling flames and swept away like a river falling from the 9th heaven. Old freak Mo Shi was caught off guard and drowned in it. His eyebrows, beard, hair and clothes were all burned, and he screamed in pain. Before, he was like a high and mighty king who regarded Lin Sun as an ant. He would crush Lin Sun to death with a casual grasp, which was an extreme humiliation and disdain. Who would have thought that in the twinkling of an eye, the situation would be reversed? Lin Sun was not crushed to death, but old Freak Mo she was burned to death and screamed in pain. His demeanor as a king was gone, which made him look funny and ridiculous. Vaguely, there was a kind of meat fragrance drifting out. Old Freak Mo she's skin was burned black, which was shocking. The power of the 5 kinds of divine flames was too overbearing and horrible. Little bastard, you're courting death. Old Freak Mo she roared furiously, which shocked the world. The sea of fire suddenly burst, and his figure rushed out. Although his beard and hair were all burned, which made him look extremely embarrassed, such a minor injury could not cause a real blow to him at all. But it was too shameful. A king realm expert had been burned to the point he seemed like a charred stick, and it would be too shameful if news of this were to spread. Go to hell. He rushed to Lin soon as he rushed out. But Lin Sun had already used ice dragon steps to rush to the king's forbidden formation outside the lake when he took out the infinite way bottle. When old Freak Mo she caught up with him, Lin Sun had already disappeared. Formation. At this moment, the king's 4 symbols forbidden formation had not been activated yet, and its aura was almost non-existent. It only played the role of covering the universe. Old Freak Mo she only hesitated for a moment and then rushed in. Chapter 989. Black Rhino's heart was filled with humiliation and hatred, and he didn't think that a lousy formation could obstruct his footsteps at all. After all, he was at the king realm. Little bastard, you won't be able to escape. All of you are ants in the eyes of the king realm. If you're smart, then it's best that you get the fuck out here for me. Black Rhino strode through the grand formation with a cold and indifferent expression, and a divine glow shot out from his eyes as he swept the grand formation with his gaze. It's nothing great. He sneered in his heart because he didn't sense any aura that could threaten him, and this caused him to be even more fearless. However, he frowned because after he entered the formation, the surroundings were boundless, and he was actually unable to capture Lin Sun's aura. Bang! He took a step forward, causing the heavens and the earth to shake while space exploded into pieces, and then a strand of invisible energy of the King Tao was released and swept towards the surroundings. He didn't know anything about formations, but he was clearly aware that nothing would be able to obstruct his footsteps before true strength. As for breaking the formation, it was too simple, and he just had to break it with force. At this instant, Black Rhino's figure seemed to have become boundlessly tall, and the energy of the King Realm spread out while the tune of the Tao rumbled, and the glow of the Tao swept out like a tide. In an instant, the grand formation shook violently while the heavens and the earth dimmed down, and it rumbled as if it was on the verge of collapse. Little bastard, if you still don't take the initiative to make an appearance and atone for your crimes before this formation is destroyed, then I guarantee that I'll make living worse than death for you. Black Rhino shouted loudly, and it rumbled like the sonorous tune of the Grand Tao. However, to his surprise, besides the chaotic rumbling of the grand formation, he was actually unable to notice a trace of Lin Sun's aura in the surroundings. You refuse to lower your head even in death? Black Rhino muttered to himself as he pressed his palm down in space. Rumble! An expanse of dark green clouds formed from Tao markings soared into the sky, and it even crushed down space. The entire grand formation was like a thatched hut that was within a violent storm, and it might collapse and be destroyed at any moment. However, Black Rhino frowned because even though the grand formation seemed to be on the verge of collapse, it wasn't completely destroyed in the end. I've already utilized 40% of my strength, so how could I not even be able to destroy a single formation? Unless, when he thought up to here, Black Rhino's pupils suddenly constricted. This is a King Tao restriction formation? Bang! At this time, in the vast wilderness, dense spiritual tattoo patterns suddenly emerged like a tide, pouring between heaven and earth. Dazzling and blazing fluctuations of restrictions swept out along with it, and it covered the heavens and the earth, causing the grand formation to change completely. This! Old Freak Inc.'s expression changed slightly as he acutely sensed an aura that could threaten his life envelop him. He had been fooled. Without the slightest hesitation, his figure flickered as he charged explosively back the way he came. He circulated the energy of the King Realm with all his might, causing his entire body to be suffused with a dark glow and monstrous might. However, before it could charge out, the spiritual patterns in the sky gathered and turned into a white tiger that was hundreds of feet long. It roared and rushed over. This white tiger was too terrifying. Its pupils were golden and brilliant, and its body was enormous. It emitted a world-destroying killing intent. When its claw pressed down, even space itself was torn apart. Bang! Old Freak Inc. She was caught off guard, and he was directly blasted flying by the claw. His figure staggered, and he seemed to be in an extremely sorry state. Damn it, it's an Imperial Tao Forbidden Array. His face instantly darkened, and he was angered to the point he almost cursed. He'd utterly never imagined that such a slaughter formation would actually be hidden at the side of the lake. Swoosh! His figure flashed. He didn't dare go head-on against it, and he charged towards the other side. At the same time, he withdrew his Imperial Tao weapon. It was an enormous bone club. This treasure had a rather great background. It was refined from the origin bone of the ancient divine beast, the nine-eyed beast, and it possessed the ferocious might to split mountains and split oceans apart. Swish! A peerlessly handsome vermilion bird with scarlet red and blazing wings flashed out, and it let out a clear cry while its perfectly curved body emanated boundless flames that burned and collapsed this expanse of the heavens and the earth and transformed it into a kingdom of flames. Bang! Without any hesitation, Old Freak Inc. She smashed down with the enormous bone club in his hand. The sea of flames split apart and dispersed, yet the vermilion bird wasn't affected at all. It soared through the sky and attacked. Its wings were like a pair of flaming blades that slashed down fiercely, overbearing, and carried the might to incinerate the world. Even though Old Freak Inc. She resisted with all his might, his skin and flesh split apart while his entire body was charred black, and he let out shrill cries like a pig being slaughtered. F***ck your mother! What sort of grand formation is this? How could it be so terrifying? Old Freak Inc. She roared furiously, yet in the end, he had no choice but to flee like a rat and charge towards another direction. Earlier, he was peerless in might, cold, arrogant, and conceited, and he seemed as if he held power over life and death. Yet now, he let out shrill cries repeatedly while all his hair and beard had been burned off, and he fled in a sorry state like a black ghost. If the cultivators of the outside world were to see this, they would absolutely not dare believe their eyes. Outside the formation, Lin Sun was controlling the grand formation with a relaxed expression on his face. On the other hand, Ko Xing and the others were flabbergasted since a long time ago, and their hearts trembled. This was a true king. Yet now, he was trapped within the formation and was in an embarrassing and dangerous situation. This was unbelievable, and it was too shocking. I've already consumed 13,000 top-grade spiritual essence, and this price is almost enough to buy half an imperial weapon. The nearby Miss Lo calculated for a moment. Her words caused Lin Sun's originally relaxed body to stiffen, and he felt a wave of pain in his heart. This damnable Old Freak Inc. She just had to appear at this moment. He's simply going to squander all my wealth. How about we taste Inc. She's meat together later? This is the meat of a King Realm creature, and it can only be encountered by luck. Lin Sun gritted his teeth and activated the power of the Grand Formation. He was going to kill this old bastard at all costs. Isn't it inappropriate? Ko Xing and the others were stunned. Eat the meat of a King Realm creature? Child Lin Sun really dared to dream. Big brother Lin Sun, I'll listen to you. Xiao He's eyes were sparkling, and she looked expectant. Well, she's another little foodie. Old Freak Inc. She is so old, and I wonder if his meat is still delicious. But if we stew him into bone soup, it'll definitely be a great tonic, Miss Lu thought seriously. Stew the bones into soup and roast the meat. We can't waste any, Lin Sun also answered seriously. Ko Xing and the others opened their mouths wide, and they couldn't believe their ears. Since when could King Realm old freaks be discussed as food? In the distance, some of the experts who hadn't fled almost fell to the ground, and they looked stunned. They couldn't imagine that such a group of people were actually discussing how to eat King Realm old freaks. This was too ferocious, and if news of this were to spread, it would definitely cause a stir in the world. At this moment, Old Freak Inc. she was on the verge of collapse, and he fled madly like a housefly. But no matter where he fled, he would be mercilessly attacked. The white tiger that shot into the sky, the vermilion bird that burned the sky with flames, the azure dragon that coiled in the sky, the black tortoise that moved like a mountain. The 4 divine beast phantoms guarded the 4 poles, and no matter how Old Freak Inc. she attacked, he was unable to shake them at all. Instead, he was killed by them to the point of wetting his pants. Little bastard. You fucking tricked me. Old Freak Inc. she was furious to the point of cursing, and his eyes almost split apart from rage while blood flowed from the corners of his eyes. This matter was too strange indeed. A king path restriction formation had actually been set up there a long time ago. Who would do this for no reason? It was definitely a trap that was deliberately set up, and it was waiting to trap him. Bang! As he roared, the enormous body of the black tortoise pressed down and directly smashed Old Freak Inc. she flying, causing blood to spray from his mouth and nose while his bones and tendons creaked, and it hurt to the point his eyes rolled back. I'm so angry. Old Freak Inc. she coughed up blood, and he was about to go mad. Since he stepped into the king's stage more than 10 years ago, he felt that unless a saint appeared, he could run amok in the world and fear nothing. But who would have thought that he would fall into a trap set up by a young man in the reincarnation developing stage, and he was even in danger of losing his life? How could he not be angry? It was not easy to become a king, especially for an independent cultivator like him, who had gone through so much trouble to step into this realm, and he hadn't even had the time to enjoy his life. If he were to die like this, who would be willing? Needless to say, existences in the king stage were indeed not so easy to kill, and he had actually not been killed after suffering such a blow. If it was any other cultivator, they would probably have been annihilated in an instant. Little friend, I was just playing with you earlier. Please be magnanimous and let me go. I guarantee that I will give you sufficient compensation. Even if I have to go through fire and water to be your mount, I will be willing to go through water and tread on fire. In the end, Old Freak Inc. she couldn't take it anymore, and he let out a pleading sound. His posture was very low, and he even abandoned all his poise and dignity. But he had no other choice. The situation was beyond his control, and he really didn't want to die. Be a mount. Ko Xing and the others looked more and more lifeless, and their eyes stared blankly. This was a king stage, but he was forced to abandon his dignity and moral integrity? No, I just want to eat meat, Lin Sun flatly refused. He knew very well that this was just an excuse. A king stage would never be willing to become his mount. Even if he lowered his head now, he would definitely turn hostile when he was free. Eat meat? Aren't you afraid of being stuffed to death? Seeing that there was no hope of surrender, Old Freak Inc. she went completely crazy and roared, Do you know that if I die, the Heavens Pivot Holy Land will never let you go? It would have been better if Lin Sun hadn't mentioned the Heavens Pivot Holy Land. Now that this orthodoxy was mentioned, Lin Sun was even more determined to kill this old bastard. Hurry up, you have already consumed nearly 30,000 pieces of upper spiritual marrow, which is more than enough to buy a supreme weapon of Kingwei, Miss Lu reminded him. The corner of Lin Sun's mouth twitched, and he used the greatest power of the formation without hesitation. Rumble instantly, lightning surged within the formation, sand and stones flew, and divine flames covered the heavens and the earth like lava, and they drowned the entire world. Old Freak Inc. She struggled madly, and he activated the supreme strength to the extreme, and he seemed to be in a desperate state. But in the end, he still failed to escape the fate of being killed, and his chest was torn open by the claw of the Azure Dragon, causing him to die on the spot. Swish, scarlet-red blood that was full of vitality poured out like a fountain, and it was tragic, beautiful, and horrifying. Outside the formation, Ko Xing and the others were completely terrified. In the distance, some powerhouses were terrified, and their blood ran cold. Even though they were unable to see everything that had happened within the formation, they guessed that Old Freak Inc. She had probably suffered a calamity. A total of 34,000 pieces of upper spiritual marrow were consumed to kill a false king who hasn't forged the Taoist root. Not bad. Miss Lu counted with her fair and slender fingers. Chapter 990. The false king was also regarded as the false king realm. It referred to the life and death realm who had not cast the Taoist root when they stepped into the king realm. The Taoist root was regarded as the root of the Great Way. The gate of Xianpin gathered the practitioner's Great Way and was the core of his cultivation. If the king realm did not have the Taoist root, he would eventually disappear like duckweed in the flowing water. He could only stop at the king realm and could not continue to seek immortality. The difference between the false king and the true king was whether he had the Taoist root or not. For example, if Mo Shi had the Taoist root, he could not be killed so easily unless the Taoist root in his body was destroyed. Mo Shi had just stepped into the king realm for more than 10 years. Perhaps he was limited by his aptitude, or perhaps he had not cast the Taoist root at all, so he was killed so easily. How could Lin Sun not feel the pain when he thought that it cost him more than 30,000 upper-grade spiritual marrow to kill a false king? Clatter Lin Sun put away the king's 4 symbols formation, and the body of a black rhinoceros the size of a hill appeared on the ground. It was burnt black with broken scales and scars. I must make full use of this meat mountain. Lin Sun made up his mind. He carried the body of Mo Shi and left with Miss Lu. Xiao He, what do you want to eat tonight? Barbecue. Your request is too simple. How about frying, deep frying, boiling, stir-frying, stewing, braising, boiling? Then will it be too much for me to eat? Then take your time. Lin Sun talked with Xiao He along the way. Hearing their conversation, the powerhouses who were in a daze couldn't help but feel numb and thirsty. Was this cruel young man really going to eat Mo Shi? Wasn't he worried about the revenge of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land? Mo Shi was a king. If it was spread out that Mo Shi became food and was divided up, the whole ancient Songzhou would be in a great shock. Do you know the background of this young man? A practitioner asked in a low voice until Lin Sun and the others disappeared. I don't know. There has never been a young talent like him in Dongxing Boundary. First, he suppressed Xing Etian, the leader of the young generation of the Thunder-Winged clan. Then, he trapped and killed old monster Mo Shi with the king's restriction formation. This is not something an ordinary genius could do. Didn't you hear that? The little girl just called him Brother Lin Sun. Why do I feel this name is familiar? Someone was confused. Lin? Wait a minute, I know. It's very likely that this kid isn't a genius from our East Triumph domain. He's from the West Eternal domain. Someone cried out involuntarily as they realized something. West Hing Boundary? Yes. The Tao Discussion Lantern Festival that occurred in Shihing World a while ago received a great deal of attention, and Lin Sun is a young fiend god that rose to prominence in this lantern festival. Unfortunately, there is too little information about him. After all, he is not a cultivator from our East Victorious domain, and the West Hing domain is too far away. I only know that this demon god Lin has stirred up a storm in the West Hing domain and is extremely dazzling among the younger generation, the group of experts discussed. When they heard this news, their hearts couldn't help but tremble. A young man from the West Hing domain had defeated Xing Etian and killed Old Monster Black Rhino before entering the East Triumph domain. This was too fierce. In the future, how big a storm would this ferocious dragon set off in the East Triumph domain? It was also on this day that some news about Lin Sun began to spread to the East Triumph domain 4 hours later. A treasure ship slowly left the random star shoal and swept towards the distance of the Boundary River. On the treasure ship, Ko Xing set up a big black pot. The green-faced assassin opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of divine flame. The flame was so hot that the water in the pot was boiling. Qi Lian and the other explorers were busy preparing all kinds of bowls and seasonings. Clang! Xiao He held a saber and slashed at the body of the black rhino beast, but only a string of sparks appeared. Although the beast's scales were cracked, they were still extremely hard. There was a dark green glow flickering on them, and they were even harder than treasures. Its body was extremely huge. Its 4 hooves were like pillars, its head was like a house, and its tail was as thick as an elephant's leg. Xiao He was sweating profusely and feeling very depressed. She had intended to help, but found that she couldn't clean up such a huge piece of food with her ability. "Let me do it." Lin Sun walked over with a smile. He rolled up his sleeves, held the broken saber tightly, and began to dissect the black rhino beast that had stepped into the king realm. The beast's flesh was crystal white, quite smooth and tender, and it didn't have a fishy smell. Instead, it emitted wisps of fragrance and flowing essence, which made people salivate. Lin Sun cut the flesh into pieces. He removed the tendons and bones, which would be used to stew soup. He chopped the internal organs into small pieces, intending to fry them. He didn't even waste the beast's blood. Lin Sun refined it into a bottle of golden beast blood essence, and put it into a jade bottle. And its horn, teeth, scales, sharp claws, and other things were also dissected one by one. These were all precious materials for refining weapons. If they were sold, they could be exchanged for a huge amount of spiritual marrow. After working for a long time, Lin Sun put the pieces of beast meat on the rack and barbecued them, smearing some seasonings from time to time. Before long, the aroma of meat permeated the air. The crystal white meat began to turn golden and oily, and the fat dripped into the bonfire, making a sizzling sound. "It smells so good." Lin Sun couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Not to mention him, Miss Lu and the others also swallowed their saliva secretly, because this was not ordinary beast meat, but the precious meat of a king realm. Not many people in this world could taste it. Moreover, this meat contained unimaginable cultivation essence, comparable to precious medicine. Not only was it delicious, but it was also of great benefit to cultivation. Wisps of light flowed, and the roasted meat became more golden and oily. The fragrance of the seasonings and the roasted meat blended together, emitting a smell that was extremely tempting. Xiao He's saliva flowed out, and she stared at it with sparkling eyes. Finally, when the roast was almost done, Lin Sun took the meat off the rack. "I'll have one first." Unexpectedly, Miss Lu was the first to be unable to resist. This made Lin Sun startled, but he immediately smiled and handed her a portion of the roasted meat. Miss Lu blushed, but she still took it. She directly tore off a piece of golden and oily meat with her white fingers and stuffed it into her mouth. "Oh, it's so delicious." Miss Lu was stunned, and her eyes lit up, revealing an intoxicated look. Her cheeks wriggled, and she began to swallow in big mouthfuls. Xiao He and the others' saliva almost flowed all over the ground. Like a pack of starving wolves, they fought for their eyes and looked impatient. Lin Sun gave each of them a portion. He also kept a portion for himself. When he put the first bite into his mouth, he also trembled all over. This taste was simply too delicious. He didn't care about anything else and began to eat heartily. He ate until his mouth was full of oil and his mouth was spewing out rays of light. This was the cultivation essence contained in the roasted meat, which had a great nourishing effect on cultivation. In the blink of an eye, Lin soon felt the qi around him roaring, and his whole body was bathed in a brilliant divine brilliance. The others did the same, eating heartily. This was the flesh and blood of a king realm ferocious beast, which was too rare. Not only did it taste superb, but it was also beneficial to cultivation like precious medicine. After eating the roasted meat, they set their eyes on the meat soup and bone soup stewing in the pot. Then, they began to cook and process different ways of eating them, such as stir-frying, deep-frying, braising. There were many different styles and textures, but all of them were wonderful. In short, this meal of meat was very satisfying. Lin Sun even took out some of his treasured wine and ate while drinking. The treasured boat was full of laughter and happiness. They had already crossed the chaotic Stars Beach, and it wouldn't be long before they reached the Dongxing boundary on the other side. At this moment they were all very relaxed, and they also realized that they would soon be separated, so they ate and drank freely. In the end, Ko Xing and the others held their bellies and lay down drunk. It wasn't that they didn't have a large appetite, but that the power contained in the black rhinoceros meat was too great for them to bear. When they reached the other side, Ko Xing and the others would leave to make a living in the Dongxing boundary. They didn't intend to return to the Shiheng boundary. They were adventurers, and the path of cultivation they pursued was different from others. Late at night, the waves of the boundary river tumbled, and the sound of waves was endless. Lin Sun burped. He was full and a little tipsy. Beside him, there were animal bones and empty wine jars on the ground. Xiao He had fallen asleep on Miss Li's legs. Her eyelashes fluttered. This 14 or 15-year-old girl slept especially soundly and contentedly. When we reach the ancient Song province on the other side, someone will come to pick me up. Then, I will return to the sect. What about you? What are your plans? Miss Lu combed her hair behind her ears. Her face was bright and clean, glowing with a gentle and holy luster. First understand the situation in the Dongxing boundary, then. I will go to the Heavenly Sword sect, Lin Sun said casually, his black eyes bright and calm. What for? Revenge. Who? Yun Qi Bai. Lin Sun didn't hide it. She would know in the future anyway. Him? Miss Lu was stunned. Her clear eyes were filled with shock and she couldn't calm down. He was known as the #1 swordsman of the younger generation in the ancient Desolation region. He had too many dazzling titles and glorious and bloody achievements. If you are a friend, don't ask for the reason, Lin Sun said with a smile. Even if you ask, I won't tell you. Miss Li's expression was complicated. It took her a long time to calm down. She gazed at Lin Sun and sighed softly. Okay, I won't ask. But I have to remind you that Yun Qinbai is a peerless figure with great luck. As early as more than 10 years ago, he had already set foot on the peak. His reputation has suppressed all his peers and he stands proudly above the younger generation of the Dongxing boundary. Over the past 10 years, he has killed no less than 100 souls of half-step king realm cultivators. All those who challenged him were defeated by death without exception. Now, everyone knows that Yun Qinbai is invincible under the king realm. The most terrifying thing is that this idea has been rooted in the hearts of every practitioner in the Dongxing boundary. Speaking of this, Miss Lu took a deep breath and said, Promise me, if you really want to take revenge, don't do it now because the chance of winning is slim, right? Lin Sun smiled and drank to his heart's content with the flagon. Then he said indifferently, If I'm not sure, I won't go to him. I have waited for a long time, and I don't mind waiting any longer. However, I have a hunch that it won't take long to kill him. Chapter 991. Dongxing Territory, Ancient Song Province. On the other side of the boundary river was a big city on the border of Ancient Song Province, Green Flame City. Several hours later, Lin Sun and the others arrived. Ko Xing, green-faced assassin, Qi Lian and the other adventurers bid farewell here. Before leaving, Lin soon gave them some spiritual medicines and treasures needed for cultivation. They were not precious, but Ko Xing and the others were deeply moved. Thinking of everything they had experienced across the Boundary River, they would never forget this demon god Lin from the West Heng territory for the rest of their lives. Then, Lin Sun, Miss Lu and Xiao he entered Green Flame City together. Green Flame City was surrounded by mountains and rivers, adjacent to the Boundary River. It was prosperous, rich, and lively. Recently, there had been shocking changes in the Boundary River, and many secrets and opportunities that had been buried for many years had been unearthed. This also made Green Flame City unprecedentedly lively. Every day, countless cultivators were attracted to the Boundary River to explore the secrets and dig for treasures. As soon as they entered the city gate, a wave of noise hit their faces. Saint's remains for sale. It's a relic of an ancient saint that has just been fished out from the fallen abyss of the Boundary River. Only 1,000 top-grade spiritual essence. Someone set up a stall not far away and shouted at the top of his voice. This made Lin Sun gasp. Selling the remains of a saint on the street? Were all the cultivators in the Dongxing territory so fierce? Young man, you also came to the Boundary River to choose treasures, right? I advise you to be careful and pay attention to distinguishing. A sage-like old man approached and reminded him. Only then did Lin Sun understand that even on the bank of the Boundary River, there would be shoddy fakes being sold. It all depended on which idiot would be cheated. Thank you for your advice, Lin Sun said. The old man twisted his beard and smiled. My young friend, you look dignified and extraordinary. I think you must be a descendant of a great force. I have a lot of treasures here, which I obtained with great effort from the Boundary River. What do you think of this? As he spoke, he turned over his palm, and a broken and mottled gray ancient jade appeared. It was branded with the breath of time and was ancient and heavy. This jade is indeed very old. It is an ancient treasure. Lin Sun nodded. Haha, little friend, you have good eyesight. Since we are fated to meet today, I will give this jade to you, said the old man as he handed the jade over to Lin Sun. Seeing this, Miss Lu suddenly smiled and quietly pulled Lin Sun's sleeve as she walked forward, saying, This is an old liar. Don't be fooled by him. Lin Sun was surprised. How so? Miss Lu turned her head and gestured for Lin Sun to look. The old man smiled as he stopped a young man dressed in luxurious clothes and said, Young friend, you look dignified and extraordinary. I presume you are, fine, even the words were the same. It was obviously a routine. Then, the old man took the opportunity to take out the damaged piece of ancient jade and gave it to the young man. The young man was overwhelmed by the favor and hurriedly declined. However, he was unable to resist the old man's enthusiasm and could only accept it in the end. Then, an interesting scene occurred. The young man seemed to feel embarrassed and wanted to pay a sum of spirit marrow as thanks. The old man looked like he was in a difficult position, but he still offered a price that was not difficult at all, 50,000 mid-grade spiritual essence. Lin Sun was speechless. This old man was really black-hearted. The broken jade was only old and had no value at all. How dare he black-hearted ask for 50,000 spirit marrow? Sure enough, the young man was stunned and then furious. Just as he was about to argue, he saw a group of ferocious practitioners surrounding him with sneers. They stared at the young man with unkind eyes and were full of threat. They were obviously the old man's accomplices. The old man sighed and said, Little friend, I just reminded you, you have to be more careful. In the end, the young man took out all his belongings and bought the broken jade. He left with a face full of shame and indignation. Then, a magical scene appeared. The old man took out another piece of broken jade and began to swindle people. This old thing! Lin Sun witnessed all this and couldn't help but exclaim, Isn't he worried about deceiving someone he can't afford to offend? Miss Lu said with a smile, This kind of old cheater has long become an expert. He specializes in scamming outsiders like you. Furthermore, before he scams them, he has already carefully identified them. If he encounters someone he can't afford to offend, he won't act. So, I was also regarded as a fat sheep by him just now? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Don't worry. If he realizes that you are not someone to be trifled with, the old liar will definitely admit defeat and apologize directly, Miss Lu said with a smile. What a deep trick, Lin Sun sighed. Yin-Yang Mother Bug, a great vicious being that is ranked in the top 10 of the ancient times. There's only a pair of them, so all those that pass by must not miss this opportunity. Not long after, another old man shouted out, and he carried a shabby pitch-black clay jar. Lin Sun came forward and saw that the jar was magical. It was full of obscure fluctuations and was very extraordinary for a long time. However, there were 2 inconspicuous silkworm cocoons in the jar. Another old liar, Lin Sun muttered in his heart. The old man said with a smile, Young man, I can tell what you are thinking. However, have you ever heard of a butterfly breaking out of a cocoon? Yin and Yang motherworm looks like this when it's young. When it breaks out of the cocoon, it will definitely surprise you. Go and deceive others. Lin Sun was speechless. Did he look like a gullible person? Why did they come to him? The old man didn't look embarrassed at all. He said calmly, Whether you believe it or not, the opportunity is in this jar. Whether you miss it or not depends on your fate. Lin Sun nodded and turned to leave. Not long after, the old man let out a scream and lamented, Damn it! Why did the white jade butterfly cocoon that I painstakingly concocted die? His words caused many practitioners nearby to curse. Old liar, didn't you say that it was the cocoon of Yin and Yang motherworm? Why did it become the white jade butterfly? Then, the old man fled dejectedly. Did you do it? Miss Lu looked at Lin Sun beside her. Lin Sun said with a smile, Yin and Yang motherworm is comparable to Little Silver. It's one of the top 10 great beasts in the ancient times. I just released a trace of Little Silver's aura just now to test its authenticity. Miss Lu smiled. Little Silver was a genuine god-devouring bug. A wisp of its aura wasn't something that any living creature could withstand. They didn't stop and continued to walk forward. Green Flame City was very lively. Treasures from the border river were being sold everywhere. There were real and fake treasures everywhere, and all of them had extremely frightening origins. There were all kinds of things, such as the remains of saints, ancient secret treasures, ancient great medicines, but most of them didn't live up to their name. However, there were some really good things among them, but they were ridiculously expensive. Not long after, Lin Sun and the others stopped in front of a stall. There was a rusty, mottled bronze mirror for sale. It was engraved with dense Taoist patterns, but most of the Taoist patterns were broken and incomplete. Even so, this item was still extraordinary, and it emanated a unique aura of Taoist Tao. According to the stall owner, this mirror was dug out from a dilapidated tomb in the border river. After Lin Sun and Miss Lu sized it up, they both determined that it was an ancient sacred treasure, but it had long been damaged to the extreme. It was like a useless treasure with no divinity, and its value was not great. Even so, it still attracted many cultivators to watch and ask for a price. I want this bronze mirror, said a powerful alien race creature. He had the head of a bird and the body of a human. His eyes were like lightning and he looked fierce. 8,000 superior grade spiritual essence. This treasure is mine. Another cultivator made a bid. Soon, the price of this bronze mirror rose to 80,000 superior grade spiritual essence, attracting more and more cultivators to watch. Another scam. They're deliberately finding people to raise the price. Let's see which sucker gets scammed, Lin Sun muttered in his heart. He carefully observed and found some clues. Speaking of which, this was indeed a sacred treasure, but it was already ruined and not worth such an outrageous price. Suddenly, Lin Sun sensed something. There were some other strange treasures being sold in this stall. What caught Lin Sun's attention was a bronze fragment about half a foot long, and it was seriously corroded. Could it be a fragment of some treasure? Lin Sun carefully identified it and couldn't help but hold it in his hand to examine it. After that, he cursed in his heart. This stall owner is really dishonest. This thing is probably a fragment of a treasure left behind from the primeval times, but the traces of decay on it were created using a secret technique, and it's utterly impossible to notice if one doesn't look carefully. This was obviously to make people mistakenly think that they had found a good treasure, and they would have the secret joy and greed of picking up a bargain. Sure enough, when Lin Sun examined the item, the stall owner was slightly stunned, and then pretended to be careless and said, "My little friend, do you fancy this treasure? It's not very rare. How about I sell it to you for 3,000 superior grade spiritual essence? Your price is too high. It's just a broken bronze fragment." Xiao He curled her lips. Lin Sun also shook his head. This price is indeed too high. As he said, he picked up a blood-stained mottled stone and began to examine it. "My little friend, this stone is not simple either. It was unearthed from an incomplete ancient forbidden formation. Do you see the blood stains on it? It's very likely to be divine blood." The stall owner said mysteriously, "If you want it, I will sell it to you for 3,000 superior grade spiritual essence, including the bronze fragment." Lin Sun continued to shake his head. "It's still too expensive." As he said, Lin Sun put down the stone and looked at some other items. After examining them one by one, he finally shook his head and was about to leave. "My little friend, wait. How about 3,000 superior grade spiritual essence, and you can take all these things?" The stall owner hurriedly tried to persuade him to stay. After thinking for a long time, Lin Sun reluctantly agreed. Seeing this, the stall owner became suspicious. He was very clear about the value of these junk. Not to mention 3,000 superior grade spiritual essence, even 1,000 was a ripoff. Out of caution, he carefully checked those items one by one again, and then completed the transaction with Lin Sun with a forthright face. "Brother Lin Sun, that guy is obviously cheating you. Why did you fall for it?" Xiao He asked after walking for a short distance. She was very puzzled. "In my opinion, I should have picked up a bargain," Miss Lu said thoughtfully. Chapter 992. What on earth is it? Miss Lu couldn't help asking. She was also surprised, because she had carefully identified the things Lin Sun bought just now. They were not rare and valuable. A formation stone stained with blood. Even the old monster of King Realm couldn't see through it. But in the eyes of a spiritual tattoo master, it's a treasure. Lin Sun transmitted his voice. Because it involves an extremely profound forbidden power, it seems inconspicuous, but in fact there are other mysteries inside. At the same time, the purple-robed young man hurried to the stall and cried, "Boss, where are the things I saw just now? I just sold them. What's wrong?" The stall owner was suspicious. "How can you sell them?" The purple-robed young man's face darkened, and he was a little exasperated. "Didn't I tell you not to sell them?" As he said, he grabbed the stall owner's lapel and gritted his teeth. "Tell me, who bought them? Where is that person now?" The stall owner was shocked and struggled. "Do you know where you are? How dare you hurt me? I'm from Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. Do you think I dare?" The purple-robed young man looked cold. His words made the stall owner's face change greatly. His attitude was completely deflated, and he told what had happened just now truthfully. "You untrustworthy bastard! You ruined my business. If I can't find that prohibition stone this time, I'll skin you alive." The purple-robed young man left a harsh word and turned away with a livid face. Prohibition stone? The stall owner was dumbfounded and lost his wit. Although he didn't know what it was bound to be an extraordinary treasure, since the successor of Heaven's Pivot Holy Land was so anxious and concerned about it. "Damn it! I've been hunting wild geese all day long, but today I'm blinded by them." The stall owner beat his chest and stamped his feet. He was both upset and frustrated, and his heart was bleeding. The purple-robed young man searched hard in the vast sea of people, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. In the end, he failed to find the buyer described by the stall owner. Damn it! I was only a step away, yet I actually missed such an enormous fortuitous encounter. The purple-robed young man was so angry that he almost went crazy. Finally, he sighed, I have to report to Marshal Uncle first. Tianyi Treasure Building. It was one of the most famous firms in Jade Flame City. When they arrived, Lin Sun's eyes lit up. This building was completely constructed from a type of profound mound amethyst, and it was 3 kilometers tall. As it stood there, it pierced into the clouds, and its entire body seethed with violet light. It was crystalline, translucent, and extremely lofty. Strings of azure-colored glass palace lanterns hung beneath the eaves of the pavilion, and they emanated divine radiance that was reflected on the walls. They complemented the violet glow of the lanterns, and it was gorgeous to the point of being illusory. Lin Sun was a little surprised. With his current eyesight, he could see that the whole building was covered with dense spiritual tattoo formations, which echoed with each other and formed a defensive formation comparable to the King Forbidden formation, which was extremely marvelous. This formation wasn't all that terrifying. The key was that the amount of spiritual marrow required to operate this formation was an astronomical figure. From this, one could tell how wealthy the owner of this heavenly tower was. After entering, the interior of the building was completely different. It was extremely spacious, and the ground and walls were all covered with light golden-colored glass jades, which were polished to the point of being as smooth as mirrors. Under the illumination of the gilded bronze lanterns, the building looked extremely majestic. I'm going in to look for someone to handle some personal matters. Why don't you wait here with Xiao He for a while? Miss Lu said. All right. Lin Sun nodded. Miss Lu immediately called for an attendant, and after a short conversation, she was guided into the depths of the building. Lin Sun could guess that Miss Lu was probably preparing for her return to the sect. Since he had nothing to do, he and Xiao He began to browse around the heavenly tower. This building was indeed extraordinary. It sold all kinds of treasures, rare treasures, spiritual herbs, spiritual materials, a dazzling lineup. As far as the eye could see, there was a dense and dazzling glow of treasures everywhere, dazzling to the eyes. Even someone like Lin Sun, who was used to seeing all kinds of treasures, couldn't help but feel surprised. This heavenly tower truly lived up to its name. All of its treasures were of the highest quality, and none of them were ordinary. For example, one of the treasures, the Netherlight Cloud Armor, was made from a type of netherworld chi found in a bottomless abyss, combined with hundreds of spiritual materials. A complicated spiritual formation was laid on top of the armor, giving it the ability to be impervious to fire and water, as well as to avoid dust and calm one's mind. Another example was a pair of boots. Although they looked simple, they were made from the fur of a golden-eyed black sparrow, which was extremely rare and precious. However, they were extremely expensive, and ordinary cultivators couldn't afford them. Unknowingly, they had arrived at the area for exchanging treasures. Lin Sun's heart skipped a beat. He went through the items in his storage ring, planning to exchange all the treasures that he couldn't use for spiritual marrow. However, right at this moment, he suddenly heard a woman's voice coming from not far away. Hey, isn't this Xiao He? How long has it been since we last met? Why are you here instead of begging on the streets? Don't tell me you can't live any longer, so you're begging me for some food? Her words were sarcastic and harsh, which made Xiao He, who was standing next to him, stiffen. A look of anger emerged on her pretty face. Lin Sun turned around and saw a young girl dressed in luxurious clothes walking towards him from afar. She was only 14 or 15 years old, but she had a cold and arrogant attitude. Her eyebrows were raised high, and her lips were slightly pursed. She had a gorgeous appearance, but at this moment there was an undisguised sneer and ridicule on her face. When she walked over, some of the nearby attendants saluted and said, "Greetings, Miss Pei." Pei Wen had an arrogant look on her face. She raised her chin and ignored the attendant's greetings, then went straight to Xiao He's side. "TSK, look at you, still in such dire straits. Didn't you swear that you'd rather die than beg for food? But now, I can see that you're no different from the time you begged for food last year." She squinted at Xiao He and sized her up from head to toe. Her tone was full of sarcasm and disdain. "Tell me, what are you doing here at the Heavenly Tower?" "Pei Wen, I don't want to argue with you about what happened in the past. To each his own. You have your way of living, and I have mine. Why do you have to ridicule me as soon as we meet?" Xiao He's pretty face turned red, and she clenched her fists unconsciously. Obviously, she and Pei Wen were old acquaintances. Pei Wen giggled and said, "I don't like you, so what's wrong with ridiculing you? You and I are both from poor families, but I'm lucky to have met the benefactor of my life and changed my fate. But you, haha, you're so pitiful. Don't go too far." Xiao He was furious. "Don't forget how you changed your fate." Pei Wen sneered. "The process is not important, the result is important. Look, I'm respected wherever I go, but you are still a beggar who can't even show your face." At this point, she suddenly frowned and said coldly to the attendants in the distance, "Who allowed you to let this beggar in? This is the Tianyi Pavilion, not a place where anyone can come and go as they please." The attendants kept quiet out of fear. "What are you waiting for? Throw her out now," Pei Wen scolded. This was an undisguised blow and humiliation. You've gone too far." Xiao He was so angry that her body was trembling. She almost bit her lip. At this moment, Lin Sun couldn't stand it anymore. He had a rough idea of what was going on. Although he didn't know the exact reason, it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that Xiao He was being bullied right under his nose. Chapter 993. What Lin Sun couldn't tolerate the most was that this girl named Pei Wen had been acting like she didn't care about anyone else. Any normal person could tell that Xiao He was here with him, but this Pei Wen had humiliated and attacked Xiao He right in front of him. Who could tolerate this? "Miss, please leave the Heavenly Tower. This is not a place for someone of your status." The attendants walked over and looked at Xiao He coldly. If Xiao He dared to disobey them, they would take action immediately. The atmosphere seemed to have frozen. Xiao He was so angry that her almond-shaped eyes were wide open. Her face was flushed and her limbs were trembling. She really didn't expect such a thing to happen. "Of course," Pei Wen said with a smile, "if you kneel down and beg me now, I might forgive you for what you did in the past. Don't even think about it." Xiao He shouted angrily. "Throw her out." Pei Wen's expression turned cold as she gave the order. "Enough." As Lin Sun spoke, a touch of coldness appeared between his eyebrows, and an invisible momentum also spread out. Pei Wen's expression changed slightly, but she immediately sneered. "Young master, this is the Heavenly Tower. Are you planning to cause trouble here? If you know what's good for you, you'd better leave, lest you get yourself into trouble." At the end of her words, a hint of arrogance appeared on her lips. Although Lin Sun's aura had frightened her, she was confident that with the reputation of the Heavenly Tower, she would be able to stop him from acting recklessly. However, she was wrong this time. Lin Sun had tolerated her because he didn't want to get into trouble. However, he had already made his stance clear. If the other party still didn't know what was good for them, he would be courting death. Just as Pei Wen finished her words, Lin Sun raised his hand and slapped hard on Pei Wen's gorgeous face that was filled with pride and disdain. Slap. The slap was loud and clear. He didn't show any mercy to the fairer sex. Pei Wen let out a blood-curdling scream as she was sent flying. With a plop, she fell over 30 meters away. Her hair was disheveled and blood was gushing out from her mouth and nose. Half of her face was red and swollen. She looked miserable. The nearby attendants turned pale with fright. They immediately stepped forward and shouted, "Stop! Do you know where you are? How dare you behave so atrociously here?" Scram! Lin Sun's eyes were like lightning. He didn't even turn his head. His shout exploded like thunder, making those attendants' heads buzz. They fell to the ground in disorder, screaming incessantly. Some of them even bled from their 7 orifices and fainted. The scene was instantly in chaos, and all hell broke loose. Some of the Xiozha who were shopping in the distance couldn't help but feel shocked when they saw this. The Heavenly Tower's background was extremely profound, and it was known as the #1 trading company in Jade Flame City. In the past, who dared to cause trouble here? You dare to hit me? You're dead. None of you will be able to leave this place alive today. Peiwen screamed from afar. Her face was filled with rage, and her voice was filled with resentment. One had to admit that the Heavenly Tower did have a solid foundation. In just a blink of an eye, a group of elite and formidable cultivators had rushed into the building. "Young Miss Pei, what happened?" The guard in the lead asked in a deep voice. "Are you blind? Can't you see that someone is causing trouble? Go. Capture them all. Don't let any of them escape." Peiwen screamed hysterically. She was on the verge of going crazy. "Here." The guards fixed their eyes on Lin Sun and Xiao He. Their expressions were cold and murderous. "Friend, are you going to surrender, or do you want us to make a move? This is the Heavenly Tower. Even if you're at the reincarnation developing realm, you won't be able to leave after causing trouble here," the guard in the lead said coldly. He could tell Lin Sun's cultivation at first glance, so he didn't make a move immediately. "Causing trouble?" Lin Sun's black eyes turned even colder. "I don't have time to waste with you. Get out of my way if you don't want to die." As he spoke, he took a step forward and appeared in front of Peiwen. His hand moved like lightning, and he grabbed Peiwen's neck, lifting her up like a chicken. His movement was so fast that the guards couldn't react in time. They only saw a blur before Peiwen was under his control. The guests who were watching from afar gasped. They realized that Lin Sun was a ruthless man despite his young age. He was not afraid of the Heavenly Tower's threat at all. Who was this guy? This person was really daring. Peiwen was stunned for a moment, then she became furious. She struggled violently and screamed, "You won't be able to live even if you kill me." Slap! Lin Sun swung his hand and slapped her across the face, sending her flying away. Her vision darkened and she almost fainted. She looked miserable at the moment. Tears and mucus flowed down her face, and her face was red and swollen like a pig's head. She didn't look proud or conceited at all. "Go!" At the same time, the guards were completely enraged. They thought Lin Sun didn't know what was good for him, and dared to cause trouble in the Heavenly Tower. He was so arrogant that he didn't know what was good for him. These guards were indeed the elites of the Heavenly Tower. They were experienced in battles, and their leader was a reincarnation developing realm cultivator who had experienced many battles. In front of this kind of power, any ordinary cultivator would be wary of it. Unfortunately, Lin Sun was not an ordinary cultivator. In the past, countless geniuses had died in his hands. Not long ago, he had even trapped and killed old Freak Black Rhino, a king realm cultivator. Under such circumstances, why would he be afraid of the Heavenly Tower? As for the group of guards in front of him, they might be a great deterrent to ordinary cultivators, but in Lin Sun's eyes, they were nothing but a bunch of chickens and dogs. "I've given you a chance, but you don't know how to cherish it. Since that's the case, you'll have to pay the price." As soon as the cold and indifferent voice was heard, Lin Sun disappeared from where he was standing. Bang! In the next moment, the leader of the guards, who was at the reincarnation developing realm, fell to his knees on the ground as if he had been struck by lightning, as if his knees had been shattered. The guests in the distance were shocked and in disbelief. Wasn't this too straightforward? Bang, bang, bang! At the same time, Lin Sun's figure flickered. Wherever he went, those guards, who were considered elites in the eyes of the outsiders, were suppressed one by one before they could even struggle. They fell to the ground in disorder. For a moment, Miserable screams and wails lingered in the air, echoing in the heavenly tower's main hall. It was a hair-raising scene. The guests in the distance were dumbfounded. From the moment Lin Sun made his move to the moment it ended, only a few breaths had passed, and those guards were all suppressed like a whirlwind. The scene was so shocking that no one could react in time. As for Lin Sun, he looked calm and collected, as if he had just done something trivial, which made the guests' hearts tremble. Lin Sun glanced around with his dark eyes and said in a cold tone, "You bullied the little girl beside me, and now you're accusing me of causing trouble. How overbearing. Fine, I'll cause trouble today. If you can't satisfy me today, I don't mind tearing this place down." In an instant, the atmosphere in the hall was deathly silent, almost suffocating. Tearing down the heavenly tower? Whether it was Pei-Wen, the guards, or the guests, their expressions changed drastically. They could hardly believe their ears. It was unimaginable that such words would come from the mouth of a young man at the reincarnation developing realm. Was he fearless because he was ignorant? Or did he have the confidence to do so? Humph! I'd like to see where this bastard came from. How dare he cause trouble in my heavenly tower? Right at this moment, a cold voice was heard. Accompanied by the voice, two old men surrounded a red-robed youth like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon as they walked in. "Young master, help! Save Pei Xiaowen!" Upon seeing the red-robed young man, Pei-Wen, whose face was swollen like a pig's head, mustered up the strength to cry out. At the same time, the expressions of some guests in the distance changed slightly as they recognized the newcomers. The two old men had snow-white hair and beard. Their expressions were cold and calm. They were the two half-step to King Realm elders of the Heavenly Tower. One was called Wei Tianxing, and the other was Wu Yuanchu. They had a great reputation in Jade Flame City. Along with their arrival, all the chaotic and clamorous noises disappeared without a trace with just a sweep of their eyes. The faces of the guards and attendants revealed expressions of reverence, and they kept quiet out of fear. The red-robed young man who led the group was the eldest son of the Heavenly Tower's master. His name was Gao Yunkuan. He was tall and slender, and his eyes were cold and sharp. Every move he made was filled with a sense of arrogance and aloofness. In Jade Flame City, Gao Yunkuan was famous for being domineering. He was arrogant, domineering, vengeful, and merciless. Many cultivators would turn pale at the mention of him. "Young master!" As if he had found his savior, Pei-Wen threw herself on her knees before Gao Yunkuan's feet while crying. She wore a pitiful expression as if she had suffered all kinds of grievances. "Who beat you up like this?" Gao Yunkuan furrowed his brows. Pei-Wen's hair was disheveled, her face was swollen, and tears were streaming down her face. "It's him. Not only did he commit murder, he even said that he would tear down our heavenly tower. He deserves to be hacked into pieces and burned to ashes." Pei-Wen glared at Lin Sun in the distance and spoke through clenched teeth. He really doesn't know what's good for him." Elder Wei Tianxing sneered. "No matter what the reason is, anyone who dares to cause trouble here will be punished with death." Elder is right. It's not a big deal for me to be humiliated, but if the Heavenly Tower's reputation is tarnished, it will be a serious matter. If we don't punish them, how can the Heavenly Tower maintain its foothold in Jade Flame City? Pei-Wen's eyes were filled with hatred. He pointed at Xiaohe and said, "And this little girl, she deserves to die 1,000 deaths. She brought that guy here to cause trouble, she must be punished severely." Xiaohe was no longer angry. She knew that the situation before her was not a problem for Lin Sun. However, she still felt guilty, thinking that it was because of her that Lin Sun was involved in this mess. "All right, I'll leave this little girl to you." Another elder, Wu Yuanchu, nodded his head coldly. The guests in the distance felt a chill in their hearts. They realized that the young man and the little girl were going to face a great calamity, and that they would not be able to leave this place today. Right at this moment, Lin Sun, who had witnessed everything, spoke. "Are you done? If you are, you can be on your way." Chapter 994. As soon as he finished speaking, Pei Wen laughed. She laughed out of anger. How dare this guy speak such arrogant words at a time like this? She couldn't help but scream, "Ignorant fool, it's time for us to send you to hell!" Swoosh! At this moment, Lin Sun's figure suddenly disappeared. Wei Tianxing and Wu Yuanchu's expressions changed. They reacted quickly and protected Gao Yunkuan in front of them. Crack! As soon as they did that, they heard the sound of bones breaking. It was extremely ear-piercing in the silent atmosphere. Then, they saw Pei Wen's neck was broken before she could finish her words. Her red and swollen face was still filled with resentment and disdain. Pei Wen's vision turned black as a heart-wrenching pain surged through her body like a tidal wave. She saw Lin Sun, who was not far away, looking at her with an indifferent expression. His cold, black eyes were filled with ruthlessness and coldness. Bang! Then, her head tilted to one side and her body fell to the ground. She was no longer breathing. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. From Wei Tianxing and Wu Yuanchu protecting Gao Yunkuan to Lin Sun killing Pei Wen, it happened almost at the same time. It was unbelievably fast, so fast that no one expected Lin Sun to attack brazenly under such circumstances. He killed Pei Wen with a single strike without any fear. That kind of direct and efficient method, cold and domineering attitude, caught everyone off guard. They were stunned. This was the Heavenly Tower. How dare that young man kill someone in front of two half-step King Realm experts? You're courting death. Gao Yunkuan was enraged. His face was filled with killing intent. Pei Wen was my most beloved maidservant. How dare you kill her in front of me? You're really audacious. His cold voice rumbled through the hall, making everyone's heart tremble. Maidservant? Lin Sun was startled. He then sneered. A maidservant dares to be so domineering and arrogant. Like servant, like master. Judging from your appearance, I'm afraid you're not a good person. Young master, there's no need to say any more. This old man will take care of this vile spawn. Wu Yuanchu stepped out, the aura around him rising steadily. In an instant, the imposing aura of a half-step King Realm expert was like a gale that covered the heavens and the earth and filled every single inch of air within this hall. Thump, 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 thump. The guards and attendants were unable to endure the pressure and directly fell limply to the ground. The guests who were watching from afar also cried out in alarm. They were also shocked by this terrifying aura, and their faces turned pale. Little fellow, I'll give you a chance. Choose a way to die. Wu Yuanchu's hair and beard fluttered, and he revealed the arrogant, imposing aura of a half-step King Realm expert. Everyone's heart trembled. However, upon hearing this, Xiao He suddenly revealed a pitiful expression. This old fellow probably didn't know that the number of half-step kings who had died in Brother Lin's hands was uncountable. Lin Sun also smiled, revealing a mouthful of white and neat teeth. Old dog, just because of this sentence, you can go on your way too. Whoosh. He strode out and charged forward. This surprised everyone. That's a half-step King Realm expert, yet this fellow isn't afraid in the slightest and even directly charged forward? Is he tired of living? You're like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Wu Yuanchu was disdainful as well. His entire body surged with jet-black light, and he moved like a bolt of lightning as he stretched out his palm and slapped it towards Lin Sun, who was charging at him. Bang! The two of them collided and erupted with dazzling divine radiance that swept towards the surroundings. At the same time, a shrill cry resounded. When everyone thought that Lin Sun had suffered a calamity, they noticed to their astonishment that the half-step King Realm expert with a terrifying imposing aura, Wu Yuanchu, was still in midair, yet his body seemed to have been shackled and suppressed to the point of being unable to move. After that, his right arm that he stretched out exploded into pieces with a bang. Subsequently, his chest collapsed as well, and a bloody hole the size of a bowl appeared there. In the end, amidst shrill cries of terror, rage, and terror, Wu Yuanchu's entire body exploded into a rain of blood that sprayed through the sky. The rain of blood shot out violently and dyed the sky and ground red, and it was like rainwater that slapped onto the guards and attendants, causing it to be scarlet red and pungent to the nose. Hiss! Everyone present gasped as if they had been struck by lightning. They felt a chill run down their spines, and their souls almost left their bodies. In just a split second, that young man did not die, but Wu Yuanchu, the elder of the heavenly tower, was directly killed. He was so dead that his body could not even be found, and he had turned into a pile of flesh and blood. This was too terrifying. This was a half-step King Realm expert who was extremely famous in the Green Flame City. All these years, he had helped the Heavenly Tower solve countless troubles. But now, before he could even touch the corner of his opponent's clothes, he had exploded and died. Who could believe this? In fact, Wu Yuanchu's death was not strange at all. In his eyes, Lin Sun was only a young man at the reincarnation development realm, and he looked unfamiliar. Subconsciously, he had looked down on and neglected Lin Sun. However, even at the moment of his death, he would never have thought that he would have the misfortune of running into a peerless figure comparable to a demon. With Lin Sun's current cultivation, he could withstand the attacks of the 6 half-step King Realm experts of the Sacred Flame sect without the help of the Broken Blade. Under such circumstances, how could Wu Yuanchu have a chance to survive? Gao Yunkuan's pupils constricted, and his expression changed drastically. Wei Tianxing's body trembled, and he almost cried out. He could no longer maintain his composure. He did not dare to think that if he had attacked just now would he have been killed with a single punch? He was completely flustered, realizing that he had kicked an iron plate this time. The others in the hall had long been scared out of their wit. They were like clay puppets, almost suffocating. The visual impact of watching a half-step King Realm expert being killed with their own eyes was not ordinary. What's going on? Right amidst this deathly silence, a dignified shout resounded. Accompanying the figure was a middle-aged man in a green robe. His hair was as black as ink, and his eyes were like that of a tiger's. His shoulders were broad, and he had a dignified aura. Beside him was a woman. It was Miss Lo. When she saw the scene in the hall, she was slightly startled. Father! When he saw the middle-aged man in a green robe, Gao Yunkuan seemed to have grasped the last straw. He completely regained his senses and became spirited. At the same time, Wei Tianxing and the guards present bowed and addressed him as clan leader. This person was the boss behind the Heavenly Tower, the clan leader of the Gao clan, Gao Tiani. He was a big shot in Jade Flame City who had the ability to overturn the world. Tell me, what's going on? Gao Tiani frowned. When he saw the flesh and blood all over the ground, his eyelids twitched and his face darkened. This person killed my maidservant first, and then Elder Wu Yuanchu was brutally killed by him. Gao Yunkuan's eyes were cold and awe-inspiring as he stared at Lin Sun. If you hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid this bastard would have killed me as well. Gao Tiani's eyes emitted a cold light as he locked his gaze on Lin Sun. He was obviously angry. Father, you've seen everything. This bastard is rampant and cruel. If we don't kill him, how can the Heavenly Tower maintain its foothold in the city? Gao Yunkuan shouted. But right at this moment, Miss Lu said indifferently, Interesting. My friend has just arrived at the Heavenly Tower, yet he has already caused such a big commotion. He was even labeled as savage and cruel. Is this the way you treat your guests? Friend? Gao Tiani was stunned. His pupils dilated in disbelief. Miss, what do you mean by this? Am I lying? Gao Yunkuan was sullen. If he hadn't seen Miss Lu walking with his father, he would have flown into a rage. Shut up! To everyone's surprise, Gao Tiani suddenly shouted. He looked at Gao Yunkuan with a gloomy and terrifying expression, which was very unusual. Gao Yunkuan's body stiffened. He almost couldn't believe what he had just heard. This was his father. How could he behave like this? For a moment, he was puzzled and aggrieved. Then, something even more unbelievable happened. His father, the patriarch of the Gao clan and the controller of the Heavenly Tower, put on an ashamed and apologetic smile and said to Lin Sun, "So you're Miss Li's friend. I'm really sorry. No matter who was right or wrong, I hereby apologize to you, young master." As he spoke, he bowed and cupped his hands in front of his chest. In an instant, the atmosphere in the hall became deathly silent, and everyone was flabbergasted. Everything that happened before their eyes was simply like a dream, and it seemed so absurd and unreal. Who would dare believe that a great figure like Gao Tianyi, who possessed absolute power in Jade Flame City, hadn't even asked for the reason before directly apologizing to the murderer? This was too abnormal. At this moment, even the stupidest person realized that it must be Miss Lo who made Gao Tianyi react like this. But who on earth was she? How could a mere sentence make Gao Tianyi react in such a subservient manner? Not only them, but even Lin Sun was surprised. He realized that Miss Li's identity seemed to be more complicated than he had imagined. "Father! You're—" Gao Yunkuan was completely confused and cried out involuntarily. "Wei Tianxing, take this unfilial son away. If he dares to talk nonsense again, cripple him directly," Gao Tianyi said coldly, looking extremely cold. In fact, he was extremely resentful. Didn't this unfilial son see the situation clearly at this critical moment? "Wait, the matter hasn't been resolved yet and you want to leave?" Miss Li's words made Gao Tianyi stiffen all over. A dignified person like him broke out in a cold sweat at this moment. He smiled apologetically and said, "Miss Li's words are reasonable. This unfilial son dared to offend your friend. It's simply disgraceful." At the end of his words, he suddenly turned around and shouted sternly, "Unfilial son, hurry up and kneel." Gao Yunkuan was completely dumbfounded. He felt as if he wasn't his own son. Bang! Wei Tianxing, who was behind Gao Yunkuan, had long sensed the subtle changes in the situation. Chapter 995. Wei Tianxing's words sent chills down Gao Yunkuan's spine. He prostrated himself on the ground, feeling as if the entire world had abandoned him. When they saw this scene, everyone in the hall was dumbstruck. They felt as if they were dreaming, and it was so unreal. Gao Yunkuan was Gao Tianyi's son, yet he was reprimanded to kneel on the ground. Who would believe this? It went without saying that Miss Lo had a powerful background, that even Gao Tianyi had no choice but to bow down to her. Gao Tianyi looked at Miss Lo and smiled apologetically. "Miss Lo, how do you think we should handle this matter?" Miss Lo looked at Lin Sun and said, "Child Lin, what do you think?" Swoosh! All eyes in the hall fell on Lin Sun. Only now did they suddenly realize that this child Lin was the key to everything. Gao Yunkuan, Wei Tianxing, and the attendants and guards wished they could slap themselves when they thought of how they had treated child Lin. If they had known this earlier, how would they dare to treat this young master like this? Forget it, this matter ends here. Lin Sun knew when to stop. He could tell that Miss Lo and Gao Tianyi seemed to be related, and he did not want Miss Lo to completely offend Gao Tianyi. Gao Tianyi felt relieved at Lin Sun's words. He said gratefully, "Child's benevolence is truly admirable." Everyone else heaved a sigh of relief. They were worried that Lin Sun would do as he said and tear down the Heavenly Tower. As for the guests, they felt as if their horizons had been broadened. However, they could not help but feel curious. Who was this Miss Lu that she could force someone like Gao Tianyi to bow his head? And who was this child Lin? It seemed that even Miss Lu respected him. This was too unbelievable. Could he be a peerless figure from some ancient orthodoxy? If Miss Lu knew that these guests treated Lin Sun as a so-called peerless figure, she would not know whether to laugh or cry. After all, countless peerless figures had died in the hands of demon god Lin Heavenly Tower, VIP Hall. Gao Tianyi arranged a lavish banquet for Lin Sun, Miss Lu, and Xiao He. Gao Tianyi's face was full of smiles, and his witty words were like pearls of pearls during the banquet. Just from his appearance, it was impossible to tell that he was depressed or sad. After all, Lin Sun had killed a half-step King Realm expert beside him in public, but now he was talking and laughing with Lin Sun as if nothing had happened. Lin Sun had to admire his shrewdness and self-control. However, it could also be seen that compared to the death of a half-step king, Gao Tianyi cared more about his relationship with Miss Lu. At the very least, at the banquet, Gao Tianyi, who could be said to be a big shot in Jade Flame City, was like a subject meeting a queen. In reality, Gao Tianyi was also suffering in his heart, but he didn't dare to show it. "Do you think that young Master Lin is using my identity to intimidate others?" Suddenly, Miss Li's voice sounded in his ears, startling Gao Tianyi. "How would I dare? Miss, please don't test me. I swear that I will never bear a grudge against young Master Lin." Gao Tianyi hurriedly transmitted his voice to Miss Lu, but he muttered in his heart, "Isn't this intimidating? I might as well be straightforward. If I weren't here today, it would be a small matter if your Tianyi Tower was demolished. With your Gao family's background in Jade Flame City, I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to withstand young Master Lin's anger. As for his background, you'd better not inquire about it," Miss Lu said casually. Gao Tianyi was shocked and realized that something was wrong. He said with a solemn expression, "Thank you for your advice." When he looked at Lin Sun again, his eyes had changed. He knew Miss Li's identity. She came from a sacred place and her status was frighteningly high. But this young Master Lin was valued so highly by her. This was not simple. After the banquet, Miss Lu found Lin Sun for a private chat. "If everything goes well, I will leave tomorrow," Miss Lu said with a smile. "I'm afraid I won't have time to say goodbye to you then." Lin Sun was startled and said, "Can you tell me your name before I leave?" "Lo Kaiwei." Miss Li's red lips were moist, revealing a meaningful smile. "I knew you would ask this. There's no need to hide it from you now. I come from the heavenless sect of the Mystic Spirit Mountain in the sacred place. After I return to my sect, I will probably come out again when the great era comes." Mystic Spirit Mountain. The heavenless sect. This was a completely unfamiliar existence to Lin Sun. But when he heard the two words, heavenless, he couldn't help but be shocked. What kind of ancient and powerful orthodoxy would dare to use heavenless as its name? "Don't forget the Great Way potential king token I gave you. After you enter the Tianjiao Golden List, you should really consider joining a sect. After all, in this great era, any peerless figure who wants to set foot on the peak of the king's realm absolutely cannot do without the support of the power of a sect. If you rely on yourself to fight for it, it's too difficult." Lo Kaiwei warned him seriously. "Moreover, your greatest enemy is Yunqi Bai. Behind him stands the Heavenly Sword sect. This is an ancient orthodoxy that is second to none in the East Victory domain. If you want to kill Yunqi Bai, you are destined to face the threat of the Heavenly Sword sect." Lin Sun nodded. He had thought about this problem more than once, but for now, he didn't intend to join any sect. In addition, you also have to be on guard against the revenge from the Sacred Fire sect. The Sacred Fire sect is rooted in Aulai country and has an amazing origin. It can be regarded as a real orthodoxy. In terms of foundation, it is not inferior to any ancient orthodoxy in the world. Because of me, you became enemies with the Sacred Fire sect. It was not my intention, but it has happened. In the future, I will try my best to help you solve this potential threat." At the end of her words, a trace of determination flashed in Lu Saiwei's clear eyes. "I don't worry about this. I have offended many forces. One more Sacred Fire sect is nothing," Lin Sun said with a smile. Lo Kaiwei was stunned, and then burst into laughter. "I forgot that you are the famous demon Lin in the West Hung world." The next morning, an old man and a young man appeared in front of the Tianyi pavilion. The old man's hair was snow white, and he looked like an immortal. His skin was as smooth as a baby's. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand, and his breath was calm. The young man, on the other hand, had a dignified appearance. He had long light cyan hair, and his eyes were intertwined with blazing flames. He was extremely intimidating. He stood there casually, yet every single move he made carried a sharp and arrogant aura of supremacy, causing him to seem extremely conspicuous. In the nearby area, anyone who looked at the young man felt a stinging pain in their eyes as soon as they saw him. It was as if they had seen a grand sun burning wantonly, shining with boundless radiance. Gao Tianyi had already come to greet them. When he saw the old man, the behind-the-scenes leader of the Tianyi Pavilion, a powerful figure in Jade Flame City, trembled all over, and his face showed deep awe. He was about to kneel down and kowtow when the old man stopped him. "Don't stand on ceremony. I'm just here to pick up the young lady. You can skip the formalities." His voice was gentle and flat, but every word was like the sonorous voice of the Great Way, with a power that could not be disobeyed. "Senior, please come in." Gao Tianyi hurriedly ushered the old man and the young man into the Tianyi Pavilion. During this process, his heart was pounding. He had never expected that the one who came to pick up Miss Lu would be this powerful old man. In the distinguished guest hall, Lu Kaiwei had been waiting there for a long time. Lin Sun was also there. They were going to part ways today, so he had to see his friend off no matter what. "Uncle Ku Jing?" Lu Kaiwei was a little surprised when she saw the old man with snow-white hair and beard who looked like an immortal. "Kaiwei, after receiving your message yesterday, I was afraid that something might happen again, so I came in person," the old man said with a smile. "Junior sister Kaiwei, I heard that your cultivation source was injured by those bastards of the Sacred Fire sect in order to obtain the Sacred Fire Source Stone?" The young man with long light cyan hair walked up to her with a concerned expression. "How are you? Are you all right? Senior brother Yang? Why are you here?" Lu Kaiwei was surprised. "When I heard that you were injured yesterday, I couldn't wait to rush to your side." The young man did not hide his concern as he stared at Lu Kaiwei with burning eyes. However, before he could finish, Miss Lu interrupted him and changed the topic. "Senior brother Yang, Uncle Ku Jing, let me introduce you. This is Child Lin Sun. It's all thanks to his help that I was able to cross the Boundary River and escape from the Sacred Fire sect." As she spoke, she turned to Lin Sun and said, "Child Lin, this is Uncle Ku Jing and Senior brother Yang Tianchi. I'm Lin Sun. Nice to meet you." Lin Sun cupped his hands in greeting. He already knew that these two must be from the heavenless sect of Xianling Mountain, just like Lu Kaiwei. Ku Jing's eyes were as deep as the ocean. When he glanced at Lin Sun felt as if all his secrets had been seen through. This caused his heart to tremble, and he realized that this old man was definitely an extraordinary figure. Fortunately, Ku Jing quickly retracted his gaze and nodded with a smile. "Your aura is as strong as the abyss, and your cultivation is as majestic as the sea. You're a pretty good young man. You're destined to have a place in the great era battle in the future." "Senior, you're flattering me." Lin Sun was even more shocked. This old man seemed to have seen through his cultivation at a glance. Uncle Ku Jing has already passed 7 of the 9 tribulations of longevity. He can be considered a 7th tribulation king. Since he said so, it must be true, Lu Kaiwei said with a smile. "Humph." Yang Tianchi, who had long light cyan hair, snorted coldly. His gaze towards Lin Sun was intertwined with dazzling divine flames. It was extremely terrifying. "Junior sister Lu, you said that this guy helped you deal with the Sacred Fire sect's pursuit?" Chapter 996. Lu Kaiwei frowned. "I saw it with my own eyes. Could it be false?" Lin Sun was lost in thought. He was keenly aware that this guy named Yang Tianchi seemed to be hostile to him. Was it because of Miss Lu beside him? What you see may not be true. It's very easy to judge. As Yang Tianchi spoke, He suddenly stepped out and pointed his fingers at Lin Sun's eyebrows. This was very sudden, and probably no one had expected that Yang Tianqi would actually attack without any warning. This also showed how domineering and solitary his nature was. Crack! Yang Tianqi's palm was slender and white. His fingers were sharp and dazzling, like a flash of lightning in the void, fierce and direct. The void was torn apart. The distance between him and Lin Sun was less than 5 feet, and he suddenly attacked at this time. No one would have time to react. Even Lin Sun didn't expect it. When he reacted, Yang Tianqi's fingers had already approached the place between his eyebrows. The bright flame at the fingertip gathered the purest and most condensed sword intent, which seemed to be able to pierce through everything. There was no doubt that Yang Tianqi's combat power was extremely terrifying. Even if it was a sudden attack, such a terrifying finger was not something that ordinary people could perform. At this critical moment, Lin Sun suddenly retreated. At the same time, he grasped the air with his fingers like a lotus seal and knocked forward. At that moment it was like a black lotus was born in the void and blocked the finger at an incredible speed. Bang! The collision between the two burst into dazzling brilliance. Lin Sun stepped back. On the back of his right hand there was a straight blood mark, from which a drop of blood was flowing. After all, Lin Sun was caught off guard. Even if he managed to block it, his hand was inevitably scratched. A trace of coldness flashed in his black eyes. If he had reacted a little slower, the consequences would have been absolutely unimaginable. "Hey, you can block my attack?" Yang Tianqi seemed to be very surprised. He raised his eyebrows, with flames surging in his eyes and long cyan hair flying in the air. His momentum was like that of an overbearing god. "Take another blow," he shouted. "Stop!" Lu Saiwei's expression was gloomy and icy cold as she berated. "Junior Sister Lo, why is that? I'm helping you probe this person's background so that you don't know that you've been deceived," Yang Tianqi said helplessly. Even though he spoke in this way, his movements weren't slow at all. His figure was like a bolt of lightning as he transformed his fingers into a palm, and then he suddenly slapped it out in space. Bang! Wind and lightning surged, and an expanse of fiery light soared into the sky, condensing into a palm print that incinerated the void. The might was so great that it shattered all the furnishings in the hall into powder, and an ear-piercing explosion resounded. This strike was clearly stronger than before. At the same time, Lin Sun also moved. Although the previous blow was only a superficial wound, which was neither painful nor itchy, this blow made him furious. This was the first time they had met, and they had never interacted with each other before. Yet, the other party attacked as he pleased. How could they tolerate such a domineering and arrogant attitude? If he hadn't reacted in time, what would the consequences have been? So at this moment Lin Sun was also angry. Boom! He pressed his palm into the void and deduced the mysteries of the fiery galaxy, and a flaming galaxy spread out in the void. However, before the two of them could exchange blows, the old man Ku Jing's figure suddenly appeared between them and waved his sleeve. A vast and unstoppable force of the Great Path spread out and instantly dissolved the attacks of the two of them without a trace. "Martial Uncle Ku Jing, what are you doing?" Yang Tianqi frowned in confusion. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. He was also a little unhappy, but he knew that this battle was destined to be difficult to continue. "Tianqi, you're being rude." Ku Jing's expression was gentle, but there was an indescribable majesty in it. "This isn't how the Skyless sect treats its guests." Yang Tianqi's eyes flickered and he said, "I'm just being kind. I'm just thinking about Junior Sister Lo." "Yang Tianqi, since when did I ask you to think about me?" Lu Saiwei's face was as cold as frost. She was also angry. "You sneak attacked my friend in front of me. Is that your kindness?" Yang Tianqi hurriedly explained, "Junior Sister Lu, don't misunderstand me. I really didn't mean that. You should know how I feel about you. No matter what I do, it's for your own good." He obviously cared about Lu Siwei's attitude. However, Lu Siwei's face was cold, and she didn't pay attention to him anymore. This made him feel a little embarrassed, so he looked at Lin Sun more and more unpleasantly. It seemed ridiculous, but in Yang Tianqi's view, he was just testing Lin Sun's background. Lu Kaiwei was angry with him because of this, which made him very unhappy. Lin Sun, I'm very sorry about what happened just now. Lu Kaiwei apologized to Lin Sun with a trace of regret. It's okay. It has nothing to do with you, Lin Sun said with a smile. Let me treat your wound. Lu Kaiwei took out a bottle of ointment and took Lin Sun's hand to treat the bloodstain on the back of his hand. Lin Sun couldn't refuse, so he could only let her do it. However, this scene caused Ku Jing to be slightly stunned, and he couldn't help but look at Lin Sun with a trace of surprise. In his impression, Lu Kaiwei had never been so concerned about any man. Yang Tianqi's face instantly turned gloomy when he saw this scene. His heart was burning with jealousy, and his eyes, which were intertwined with flames, were filled with coldness. Before leaving, Lu Kaiwei took Xiao He, Ku Jing, and Yang Tianqi to a purple copper treasured ship. Mr. Lin, take care. Lu Kaiwei looked back and smiled sweetly. Her clear and beautiful face was dazzling under the sunlight. Big brother Lin, if there's a chance in the future, Xiao He will definitely visit you. Xiao He waved her arm. She was a little reluctant. Lin Sun smiled and waved his hand. You guys take care too. Let's go. Ku Jing steered the treasured ship and took them into the sky. Almost at the same time, Yang Tianqi's cold voice suddenly rang in Lin Sun's ears. You'd better remember that you don't deserve junior sister Lu with your status. If you dare to pester junior sister Lu again, I will kill you with my own hands. There was an undisguised threat in his voice. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. When he looked over, he saw Yang Tianqi standing on the treasured ship high up in the sky, looking down at him. His fiery eyes were filled with disdain and menacing. Swoosh! The treasured ship broke through the clouds and disappeared into the horizon. Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and silently remembered Yang Tianqi's name. Senior Gao, Lin Sun suddenly called out. Gao Tianyi, who was standing beside him, waved his hand and said, You flatter me, mister. Just tell me what you need. I want to make a deal with you. Lin Sun remembered that most of the items he had stored on him were no longer useful, so he might as well exchange them for spiritual essence. A deal? Gao Tianyi was stunned. Yes, a big deal, Lin Sun joked. Let's see if the Tianyi Pavilion can afford it. Gao Tianyi laughed and said, Mr. Lin, there's nothing in Jade Flame City that the Heavenly Tower can't afford. His words were full of confidence and heroic spirit. However, it did not take long before he froze and his body stiffened. In the appraisal hall of the Heavenly Tower, over a dozen appraisers were busy appraising the prices of various treasures. Beside them, an attendant was recording one piece of Cloud Dragon Jade, worth 800 mid-grade spiritual essence, 19 green smoke jadeite stones, worth 6,000 mid-grade spiritual essence, 9 heaven-grade spiritual swords, worth 2,000 upper-grade spiritual essence. The voices of these people recording the prices kept ringing out in the following hours. Gao Tianyi, on the other hand, had no time to pay attention to these things. His heart trembled as he looked at the pile of treasures that was as tall as a small hill. There were all kinds of treasures, including treasures, spiritual materials, elixirs, and so on. Ores, spiritual herbs. Not only were there a lot of treasures, but the quantity was also astonishing. With Gao Tianyi's shrewd eyes, he could easily tell that most of these treasures were trophies, looted from different cultivators. In particular, many of them were treasures that could only be used by half-step King Realm cultivators. Didn't this mean that more than one half-step King Realm cultivator had died in the hands of this Mr. Lin? At this thought, Gao Tianyi could not help but feel shocked. He had to admit that as Miss Li's friend, this Mr. Lin was definitely a ruthless character. But soon, Gao Tianyi had no time to think about this. because when the appraisers tallied up the prices of all the treasures, he was dumbfounded. 190,000 upper-grade spiritual essences. This was not just an astronomical figure, it was more than enough to buy 5 or 6 supreme weapons of Emperor Path. No matter how rich the heavenly tower was, it was impossible for them to take out so many spiritual essences at once. When he thought of how he had boasted in front of Lin Sun, Gao Tianyi's expression immediately became embarrassed. He really could not afford such a big deal in a short time. "Mister, why don't you choose some treasures from the heavenly tower to offset some of the spiritual essences?" Gao Tianyi suggested. "Is there anything special here?" Lin Sun asked. He had already checked. Although there were many treasures in the heavenly tower, only a few of them could be of use to him. "Special?" Gao Tianyi pondered for a moment, then his eyes suddenly lit up. "Mister, are you interested in the Stone Appraisal Convention?" "Stone Appraisal Convention?" Lin Sun was startled. "Yes, as you know, a shocking change has taken place in the Boundary River recently, especially in the chaotic Stars Shoal, where a large number of meteorites have been unearthed. According to Gao Tianyi's explanation, the so-called Stone Appraisal Convention was a grand meeting to identify and dissect the meteorites. Those who wanted to participate in the convention only needed to pay an entrance fee, then they could enter the venue and select the meteorites. Once the selected meteorites were dissected, no matter what treasures were found, they would all belong to the owner. Recently, a lot of amazing treasures had appeared in the Stone Appraisal Convention. When the news spread out, it attracted a lot of practitioners to participate in the event every day. It could be said to be a grand meeting of a new kind, and the Heavenly Tower was one of the organizers of this convention. Chapter 997. Finally, Lin Sun agreed. At the bottom of the lake in the random star shoal, Lin Sun had dug out 3 miraculous king herbs, which was an immeasurable harvest. Since the Stone Appraisal Convention was related to the meteorites, Lin Sun wanted to try his luck. Gao Tianyi was very happy. Soon, he collected 150,000 pieces of top-grade spiritual marrow for Lin Sun and gave him a token. With this token, Lin could choose a star remains meteorite worth no more than 40,000 pieces of top-grade spiritual essence to dissect at the Star Inspecting Convention. Gao Tianyi had intended to send someone to accompany Lin Sun, but Lin Sun refused. Lin Sun left the Tianyi Tower at noon. The venue of the convention was located in the suburbs, adjacent to the Boundary River. It was a large garden. Recently, because of the shocking changes in the Boundary River, Azure Flame City had become very lively. Practitioners from all over the world came to the city every day. Walking on the bustling street at this time, Lin Sun could feel this very clearly. "Have you heard that Chu Beihai, the current holy son of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, will arrive here in the afternoon to participate in the convention?" "No way. This peerless figure has come out of seclusion? I heard that it's because a strange stone appeared in the convention and attracted Chu Beihai's attention." On the street, the name Chu Beihai was being discussed everywhere. It was hard not to attract Lin Sun's attention. Azure Flame City was just a remote city in the ancient Song province, while the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land was second to none in the ancient Song province. Moreover, the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land was also very famous and influential in the entire Dongxing territory. Its profound background could be traced back to the ancient times. As the current holy son of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, Chu Beihai was naturally an outstanding figure in the ancient Song province. Lin Sun didn't need to inquire about Chu Beihai. He only needed to learn some information about Chu Beihai from the discussions. He was born with extraordinary talent and excellent innate talent. He started cultivating at the age of 3 and became a disciple of a reclusive old man in the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. At the age of 15, he had already stepped into the reincarnation developing realm. Since then, he had become one of the most dazzling talents of the young generation in the ancient Song province. His battle prowess was also extremely terrifying. The Big Dipper Heaven's center scripture that he cultivated was mysterious and unfathomable. Its offensive power was shocking. It was a true treasured scripture of the Great Path. It was rumored that a genius like Chu Beihai would definitely be able to occupy a place on the Prodigy Gold leaderboard when the Great Era arrived. This evaluation was shocking. The East Victory region is so large that it covers 19,000 prefectures, and it's the quintessence of the region of ancient desolation. There are countless ancient sects standing towering there, and geniuses are like carps in a river that are innumerable. Perhaps this Chu Beihai can be called peerless, but his influence is probably only limited to a few prefectures. Suddenly, Lin Sun heard an old man's comment, "If he can be on the Tianjiao Golden List when the Great Era comes, there is only hope." With a single glance, one could tell that this old man was extraordinary. His bearing seemed to be amiable, but there was an invisible kind of great majesty about him. If one didn't sense it carefully, one wouldn't be able to notice it. "Old man, your words are a bit exaggerated. Then who do you think can be said to be renowned throughout the world within the younger generation of the Eastern Victory world and isn't limited to a few prefectures?" Someone was displeased and muttered. The old man smiled faintly. "There are many famous people in the young generation, such as Wang Xuanyu, the successor of the Tai Taoism, Mi Hengzhen, the successor of the Sun Moon Temple, Yi Mof, the successor of the Origin sect." When the name Wang Xuanyu was mentioned, there was a sound of gasping nearby, and many practitioners' faces changed. When they heard the name Mi Hengzhen, the expressions of the practitioners changed with unconcealable shock. And when they heard the name Yi Mof, the atmosphere in the field became much quieter. Lin Sun, who had just arrived in Dongxing territory, knew nothing about this vast world regarded as the home of saints and knew nothing about it. So when he heard these three names, he didn't feel anything at all. But when he noticed the changes in the expressions of the practitioners nearby, he immediately realized that these three names probably represented three peerless figures who were famous enough to shake the East Victory region. "How do you think these three people compare with Chu Beihai?" The old man looked indifferent. Everyone was speechless and silent. The Tai Taoism was located in the easternmost part of the East Victory region, but the name of its successor Wang Xuanyu could spread to the westernmost ancient Song province, which showed that this person was extraordinary. In addition, Mi Hengzhen, the successor of the Sun Moon Temple, and Yi Mof, the successor of the Origin sect, were not inferior to Wang Xuanyu. Compared with these three people, Chu Beihai's reputation was a little inferior. It's just a reputation. If it's a real battle, Chu Beihai is not necessarily inferior to them, someone couldn't help retorting. You're right. Reputation is just a kind of strength, not everything. When the Great Era comes and the struggle for the Great Way begins, the strong and the weak can naturally be distinguished. The old man's expression had been very calm, and his words were also very casual. But when he said this, he suddenly shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, the struggle for the Great Era is also a battle of life and death. Although there are many talents in the world, I'm afraid that most of them will only become paving stones for others. Then, his figure suddenly disappeared, as if he had evaporated into thin air. Paving stones. Lin Sun was shocked. A general success was built on the bones of tens of thousands of people, not to mention the competition between tens of thousands of talents. That scene was bound to be more tragic and stirring. Who was that old man? When Lin Sun went to look for him, there was no trace of him. It could be said that he came and went without a trace, unfathomable and mysterious. Moreover, when Lin Sun thought carefully, he was shocked to find that in his mind, he couldn't remember what the old man looked like. Was he a saint? Lin Sun couldn't calm down. How could there be such a person who was so close to the heavens in the small green flame city? No. The old man might just be passing by, and his purpose might be the boundary river that was undergoing a shocking change. Lin Sun made a judgment. The street was bustling and soon restored to its previous liveliness. Because the stone appraisal conference would start in the afternoon, Lin soon found a restaurant at random, ordered some wine and dishes, and drank by himself. He knew very little about the Dongxing territory. He only knew that it was a place in the ancient desolation realm known as the Home of Saints and the Eternal Land of Saints. Before he came here, Bai Lingshi had said that 70% of the top talents in the world came from the Dongxing territory, and the remaining 30% were occupied by the Shihing realm, the Nanxian realm, and the Northern Dipper realm. It could be imagined how prosperous and glorious the Dongxing territory was. And with the coming of the Great Era, the top talents of the young generation in the four realms would all gather in the Dongxing territory. Because if the Tianjiao Golden List, which had shocked the world since ancient times, appeared, it would definitely appear in the Dongxing territory. At that time, in order to compete for the Tianjiao Golden List, all the talents in the world would definitely set off an unprecedented competition. And Lu Kaiwei once said that in addition to those peerless talents who had been famous for a long time in the world, there were also peerless geniuses who were dormant in the sacred place. She even said that when the Great Era came, the road to the King realm was destined to be paved with the blood and bones of talents. This was the Battle of the Great Era. Ji Xingyao, Yu Lingkong, Shun Baixian, Luojia, Lu Kaiwei. I have seen so many peerless talents. I really don't know how many similar figures there are in the world. Besides, how can Xiao Hao of the Star Nether Imperial family and the little child in the sacred island of 5 elements in the ultimate be willing to be lonely when the Great Era comes? And how many ancient freaks like them who have been dormant for countless years just to wait for the coming of the Great Era? Lin soon drank a cup of wine and couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his heart. There would never be a lack of talents in the world. The more he went forward, the more he understood that there would always be someone better than him. Of course, Lin Sun would not forget Yun Qinbai. If Ji Xingyao and Yu Lingkong could be said to be influential figures of the younger generation, then Yun Qinbai could be considered a legend who had already stood tall before the current generation. Big news! I just got the news that Mo Shi was killed. At this moment, someone shouted excitedly in the restaurant, causing an uproar. Mo Shi was a king. How could he be killed? It said that it was a young man named Lin Sun who killed Mo Shi. Lin Sun? Why haven't I heard of him? This man is not a practitioner of our Dongxing boundary. He comes from the West Hing boundary and can be regarded as a peerless figure of the younger generation. He also has the nickname Demon Lin. Demon Lin? Haha, this name is really arrogant. I don't know whether Demon Lin can continue to show off his demonic power in the Dongxing boundary. There was a lot of discussion in the restaurant. Lin Sun's expression was a little strange. When he was in the West Hing boundary, anyone who talked about him would either praise him highly or gnash their teeth in hatred. But in the Dongxing boundary, the people who talked about him didn't take it seriously, and their words were full of ridicule and ridicule. No, a young man like him may be terrible among his peers, but how could he be a match for Mo Shi? Someone questioned. I heard that Mo Shi was trapped and killed by Lin Sun with a King Wei forbidden formation. So that's how it is. I thought that this fiend celestial Lin was really that perverse. However, Lin Sun is quite capable to trap and kill a King Realm practitioner with a formation. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the restaurant became more and more relaxed. I heard that the Heavens Pivot Holy Land has issued an order and mobilized some forces to seek justice for Mo Shi. They will search for and capture Lin Sun. When he heard this, Lin Sun was shocked. He didn't expect the Heavens Pivot Holy Land to react so quickly. He's just a little kid from the Western Ocean world. He didn't kill old freak Mo Shi because his cultivation was formidable, and it was instead because old freak Mo Shi suffered an ambush and was trapped within the Grand Formation. Without this Grand Formation, he's nothing. Chapter 998. Near the window of the restaurant sat a young man dressed in black. He had fair skin and a feminine and aloof aura. This was obviously a descendant of an extraordinary family, and there was even a pair of young maidservants serving him meticulously in every possible way. He was the one who had said that killing demon god Lin was as easy as killing a chicken. Friend, you're being too polite. No matter what, demon god Lin killed old monster Mo Shi, a king-level existence. He's definitely not simple, someone disagreed. The man in black sneered. That's because you don't know what it means to be powerful. Moreover, although old monster Mo Shi is a king-level expert, he's just a fake king-level expert. He's only been in the king level for a decade. He can only be considered the weakest king-level expert. It's not surprising that he was killed. He was very casual and his words were full of arrogance. This made many people unhappy. The king level is the king level. Even the weakest king-level expert can't be judged by just anyone. Moreover, if demon god Lin was here, would you still dare to say such words? The man in black leisurely drank a cup of wine and said indifferently, as far as I know, he's only at the reincarnation developing realm. Killing him is as easy as flipping one's hand. Not only would I dare to say such words, I would even dare to kill him with a slap. Lin Sun was not far away and could not help but glance at the man. The man's aura was feminine. Although he did not reveal any overbearing aura, he seemed extremely arrogant and conceited. This conceit was bound to be repulsive. Someone immediately said, "This demon god Lin from the West Hing realm is only a young man, but he's already at the reincarnation developing realm. This is already quite shocking. May I ask what realm are you at, friend?" "I'm not talented. I reached the reincarnation developing realm at the age of 14, the man in black answered casually. Suddenly, everyone was shocked. They realized that the man in black was definitely a peerless figure. No wonder he dared to be so conceited. "May I ask for your name?" Someone could not help but ask. "Nangong Shui. Are you Nangong Shui from the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land? Haha, is there a second me in this world?" The man in black smiled with a proud smile. "No wonder, it's Nangong Shui, one of the 6 direct disciples of the Heaven's Pivot Sacred Land. There are very few people in the same generation as him in the ancient Azure province. The Nangong clan has 2 geniuses. The elder brother, Nangong Shui, and the younger brother, Nangong Hua, are both dazzling figures in the Heaven's Pivot Sacred Ground." Everyone in the restaurant sighed and began to discuss Nangong Shui. They had clearly heard of him before. Lin Sun was stunned. He suddenly remembered that when he was in the Xiao Empire, the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land had sent people to the mortal world and arrived at the Green Deer Academy. This Nangong Hua was one of them. At that time, a servant character by Nangong Hua's side had beaten the students of Green Deer Academy to the point that no one could fight against him. In the end, he had to make a move to suppress them one by one. Lin Sun clearly remembered that at that time, Nangong Hua was also extremely conceited, but he was kicked in the butt by Lin Sun and almost went crazy. In the end, the situation was resolved under the mediation of an old fellow at the King realm called Yu Xiu. What Lin Sun did not expect was that he would actually meet Nangong Hua's brother here. Has he guessed my identity? That's why he showed such a disdainful attitude towards me? Lin Sun mused. In the afternoon, the treasure appraisal convention began as scheduled. The outskirts of the city suddenly became lively. From time to time, divine rainbows would fly out from the horizon and human figures would flicker. Most of them were young cultivators. They all surged towards that extremely large garden. Lin Sun had also come, but at this moment, he was dressed in a black monk robe, holding prayer beads in his hand. His forehead was smooth and clean, and he had used the great non-phase technique to transform into the appearance of a young monk. If one of the 18 disciples of the Xitigarbha temple, Mu Zheng, was here, he would definitely vomit blood from anger, because Lin Sun had transformed into his appearance. Taking out the token that Gao Tianyi had given him, Lin Sun smoothly entered the garden. As far as the eye could see, there were pavilions, ancient trees, and a large area covered by the garden. Young cultivators could be seen everywhere, and at the same time, there were many other cultivators coming in one after another. Swish! A golden divine light cut through the sky. It was a treasure ship. Tens of thousands of rays of auspicious light pressed down on the clouds and directly descended into the depths of the garden. The crowd immediately became noisy and looked over. It's the important figures and talents of the heavens pivot Holy Land. What a group of powerful young people. The heavens pivot Holy Land deserves to be the first orthodoxy in the ancient Song province. It's amazing that even the descendants cultivated by them are so powerful. While the discussion was going on, many people saw a golden figure rushing out. It was a young man in a golden robe. He was handsome and slender, and his whole body was bathed in golden light. His whole body was like a dazzling sun, and his blood and chi were amazing. He was like a god. Behind him, a group of young men and women crowded around him like stars surrounding the moon, which made the young man in the golden robe even more extraordinary. Chu Beihai. Some people didn't need to deliberately show off. A casual movement could make them look extraordinary. There was no doubt that Chu Beihai was such a person. He was dignified and outstanding, like a crane in a flock of chickens. His whole body was blazing with golden light, extraordinary and refined. At this moment, many young women showed a look of infatuation and fanaticism, and those male practitioners also showed a look of admiration and admiration. As soon as a person showed up, his style dominated the whole audience. Even Lin Sun had to admit that Chu Beihai deserved to be a peerless figure. His style was so outstanding that it was hard not to notice him. Of course, Lin Sun had seen many people like this. At least Shun Baixian, Yu Lingkong, and even Mu Jing, who he was disguised as at the moment, were inferior to this person. Lin Sun didn't care much about it. What really surprised him was that he saw an acquaintance among the young men and women behind Chu Beihai. It was a handsome young man in a white robe. It was Gu Yunting. When he was in Green Deer School, Gu Yunting was second to none. He had the talent of golden body of Tao fire and was highly respected by many of his peers. However, Lin Sun and he had a conflict. Although they didn't really fight, their relationship became very bad. Now, after a few years, they met again in the Dongxing territory, which surprised Lin Sun. In fact, when he thought about it carefully, among the young disciples who went to the ancient desolation from Xiao Empire, by Lingshi, Shai Yutong, and Gu Yunting, they all entered an ancient orthodoxy to cultivate. On the contrary, Lin Sun seemed to be doing the worst. Until now, he was still alone, wandering alone. Of course, this was only the difference in whether he had a master or not. Gu Yunting was obviously doing well now. He followed behind Chu Beihai. Although his sharpness was overshadowed by Chu Beihai, it could be seen that his status in the heavens pivot Holy Land was not low. It was just that compared to Chu Beihai, he was slightly inferior. Then, Lin Sun noticed another acquaintance. He wore a fiery red jade robe, a tall hat and a wide belt. His face was handsome and cold. It was Nangong Hora, who had been kicked in the butt by him. Lin Sun quickly withdrew his gaze. He knew that all the outstanding students in Green Deer School would be sent to the Heavens Pivot Holy Land to cultivate. So, it wasn't strange to meet a few familiar faces. "Monk, don't block the way." A feminine reprimand sounded in his ears. At first, Lin Sun didn't react, but then he realized that it was an order. Turning his head, Lin Sun saw Nangong Shui, who had threatened to kill him like killing a chicken. This feminine man had his hands behind his back. He was still very arrogant and conceited. He brought along 2 maids and was staring at Lin Sun coldly. "So it's Taoist Nangong," Lin Sun smiled. Nangong Shui was startled and frowned. "Who are you?" "I'm Mu Jing." Lin Sun put his palms together and looked solemn. He imitated Mu Jing's dignified and calm demeanor. "Do I know you?" Nangong Shui was surprised. It's enough that I know you, Lin Sun said with a smile. Although his cultivation had become more and more profound, his character of seeking revenge for the smallest grievance had not changed much. Nangong Shui had threatened to kill him with a slap. If Lin Sun didn't hear it, it would have been fine. However, Lin Sun had heard it. This was no different from provoking him. Why do you say that? Nangong Shui felt that the monk in front of him was very strange. Because if there's a chance you might ask me for help, Lin Sun said seriously. What help? Monk, don't play tricks with me, Nangong Shui snorted coldly. Buddha said that I can't say it. It's not the right time, so I can't force it, Lin Sun said slowly and turned to leave. This bald donkey has learned to fool people at such a young age. In my opinion, there's no good thing among the Buddhists. Nangong Shui sneered. He felt that Lin Sun's words were very strange. As he spoke, he left with the two maids. After strolling around the garden for a while, Lin Sun came to the stone appraisal area. On the green grass there were all kinds of strange meteorites. Some were big, some were small, and all of them were filled with silver starlight. This was the outer area of the stone appraisal convention. The quality of the meteorites on display could only be considered average. The deeper one went, the better the quality of the meteorite. For example, the meteorite that attracted Chu Beihai was located in the deepest part of the garden. It was not a place that anyone could casually enter. Lin Sun came here purely to try his luck. After all, the token given to him by Gao Tianyi was equivalent to 40,000 top-grade spiritual marrows. It would be too wasteful if he didn't spend it. He stood there and carefully examined it with his divine awareness. When he dug up the 3 king herbs at the bottom of the random stars beach, he got them purely by chance. It was mostly luck. But now it was different. Every piece of meteorite was on display, marked with different prices for people to select and identify. If there was no treasure in the selected meteorite, it would be a waste of money. This was what was known as gambling on stones in the common sense. Lin Sun had no experience in stone gambling, so he planned to test the waters in the outer area first. He wanted to see how he should choose the meteorites and whether he could get something good. Interesting. Soon, Lin Sun noticed that there was a kind of obscure power surging inside each piece of star remains meteorite, which could block the probing of the divine awareness, making it impossible to perceive what was hidden inside. It was also impossible to judge whether it was a useless stone or not. Chapter 999. Under the operation of the eyes of the mocking wind, Lin Sun's eyes seemed to be able to see through all illusions and see through the essence of things. The star remains and meteorites were originally shrouded by an obscure power. Looking at them was like looking at flowers in a fog, like scratching an itch through one's boot. But now everything had changed. In an instant, Lin Sun saw a fiery red stone seed sealed in a watermelon-sized meteorite. It was only the size of a quail egg, red like fire and crystal clear. Fire source crystal. It was a precious spiritual material that could be used in medicine or forging weapons. But it was not rare. Lin Sun remembered that this treasure was sold in the Tianyi Tower. It was worth at most 800 mid-grade spiritual marrow. But now, this star remnant meteorite with the fire source crystal sealed inside was marked with a price of 500 high-grade spiritual essence, which was equivalent to 50,000 mid-grade spiritual essence. The price difference was more than 6 times. Whoever chose and bought this meteorite would definitely suffer a loss. It turns out that the eyes of mocking wind has such a wonderful effect. Lin Sun was excited. Doesn't this mean that I can definitely make a profit when I choose the meteorite? Hey monk, you are here. Do you also want to gamble on stones? At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly heard Nangong Shui's feminine voice with a hint of mockery. Turning around, he saw Nangong Shui leisurely walking towards him from afar. Beside him, there were many young men and women, all dressed in gorgeous clothes. Obviously, they were not ordinary practitioners. I am just looking around, Lin Sun said casually. Monk, tell me honestly, What do you mean by what you just said? Nangong Shui's eyes were like lightning as he looked at Lin Sun. Why do I feel like you are cursing me? Lin Sun was surprised that this guy's intuition was really sharp. But his face was solemn as he said, the time is not right. I can't say it. Monk, which temple did you come from? How can you speak like that? A young man standing behind Nangong Shui scolded. Lin Sun squinted at the man and said, Benefactor, I see that your eyebrows are full of evil and your glabella is dark. The land of the heavenly court is shrouded in bad luck. This is a bad omen. You'd better be careful with your words and actions. Otherwise, I'm afraid there will be a disaster. The man was stunned for a moment before he flew into a rage. How dare you curse me? Boom! With that, he punched at Lin Sun's face. What was domineering? This was it, fighting over the slightest disagreement. Lin Sun put his palms together and sighed softly, like a Buddha standing in a pure land, with a kind of compassion for the state of the universe. As a matter of fact, he had already secretly circulated a unique skill in the great earth scripture, the Skanda demon subduing momentum technique, causing an invisible force field to appear around his body. It had the ability to subdue demons, and it was impossible to break through all technique. Bang! Before the young man's fist touched Lin Sun's face, Lin Sun felt like hitting a diamond. It was not only extremely hard, but also produced a strong and fierce recoil force, which broke his fist and wrist instantly. Crack! After that, his entire right arm was broken, and his figure staggered back. It hurt to the point he gasped and grimaced in pain, and he almost let out a shrill cry. The pupils of Nangong Shui and the others shrank. They suddenly felt that this young monk was very strange and not simple. Lin Sun sighed. Benefactor, look, what I said before has come true. Isn't this a disaster? Everyone almost rolled their eyes. This was obviously an injury caused by a fight. How could it be a disaster? This monk was too good at talking nonsense. However, no one dared to underestimate him. Lin Sun had stood still just now, and there was no change in his momentum, but the young man suffered a recoil. This was not something an ordinary person could do. So you are a powerful Buddhist practitioner. A cold light surged in Nangong Shui's eyes like the rising and falling tides, incomparably frightening. Taoism pure Nangong, you flatter me. If there is nothing else, I will continue to appraise stones. Lin Sun smiled and turned around, too lazy to pay attention to the young man. This was the place where the Treasure Inspection Convention was held. There were many people and cultivators here. Although Lin Sun was not afraid, he did not want to cause trouble at this time. The reason why he changed his appearance was to not be recognized and avoid unnecessary trouble. Wait! However, Nangong Shui did not give up. He stepped forward and said, Since you like to appraise stones, why don't I play with you? Play? Lin Sun asked. Yes, it is a bet. Nangong Shui's eyes were aggressive. You and I will each choose a star remnant meteorite of the same price and compare the value of the treasure we cut out. The higher the value of the treasure, the more the other party will pay the corresponding amount of spiritual essence. How about it? He was very conceited and arrogant. He was quite experienced in appraising star remnant meteorite. Moreover, he had mastered a secret method, so he was very confident that he could cut out a treasure. Looking at Nangong Shui, who was full of confidence, Lin Sun had a strange feeling in his heart. He muttered in his heart, This guy is asking for a beating. If it was before, Lin Sun might have hesitated, but after discovering the magical effect of the wind-mocking eyes, he was not afraid of gambling with anyone at all. At this time, in his eyes, Nangong Shui was like a fat sheep coming to his door. If he did not make a killing, it would be a waste of his sincerity. However, although Lin Sun thought so in his heart, he sighed and said, Forget it, I am a monk. Buddha said, Diligently cultivate the precepts and wisdom, extinguish greed, anger and delusion. If I gamble with you, I will have greed and anger. Nangong Shui was immediately annoyed. This monk was simply too stubborn, he was too unhappy. Monk, are you afraid? If so, you should take the initiative to admit defeat and apologize to Brother Nangong. Then we will not bother to argue with you anymore. Some people said contemptuously. Oh, you are really deceiving yourself. If you are not greedy, how can you come to the treasure inspection convention? You bald donkeys are really hypocritical. Some people sneered. Monk, are you still a man? If you are a man, be quick. If you are not even as good as a woman, why are you still cultivating Buddhism? A shrewish girl in a red dress shouted. Lin Sun sighed helplessly and said, Well, Buddha said, to enlighten others is to enlighten oneself. Today, I will enlighten fellow practitioner Nangong. As soon as Lin Sun said this, everyone sneered. Enlighten Nangong Shui? This monk was really arrogant. Nangong Shui's forehead was full of black lines. Why did these words sound wrong? It sounded like he was a demon and needed to be enlightened. Let me make it clear first. I only have 40,000 top-grade spiritual essence. If I lose it all, I will never gamble again. Lin Sun frowned and looked like he was lacking confidence. 40,000 top-grade spiritual essence? The eyes of those who came with Nangong Shui suddenly lit up. They didn't expect that this monk, who seemed to be so weak, had such an amazing wealth. 40,000 high-grade spiritual essence stones was something that even the disciples of great sects rarely possessed. Nangong Shui was also startled. He didn't expect that he would accidentally catch a fat sheep, and a monk at that. When the F***K did monks become so rich? All of a sudden, Lin Sun seemed to have turned into a huge walking spiritual essence. He was shining and full of temptation. Monk, how about we also participate in the bet? Someone couldn't help but ask. This. Lin Sun looked embarrassed. I only have this much spiritual essence. I'm afraid I can't afford to lose. It's okay. Maybe you will be lucky and win. A young man tempted. The others also egged him on. In the end, Lin Sun sighed and nodded. Buddha is merciful. Since you are so sincere, how can I refuse? This fat sheep took the bait. These men and women were very excited. They couldn't wait to slaughter Lin Sun. At the same time, Lin Sun smiled brightly in his heart. He didn't expect that not only would he be able to slaughter Nangong Shui, but there would also be a group of fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered. He couldn't help but wonder if all Buddhists were blessed with luck. Their movements had already attracted the attention of many practitioners. When they learned that Nangong Shui and a Buddhist cultivator were going to make a bet, they became excited and gathered around to watch the fun. Okay, stop talking nonsense. Let's start with the 500 top-grade spiritual essence meteorite. How about it? Nangong Shui couldn't wait any longer. Okay. Lin Sun frowned, showing a helpless and compromising posture. This made the onlookers sigh with emotion. This Buddhist cultivator was really merciful. He obviously lacked confidence, but he still wanted to bet. Wasn't this the same as sending himself to be slaughtered? If it weren't for Nangong Shui's power, they would have joined in and slaughtered the monk. This one. Nangong Shui had already chosen a meteorite. He made a decision without hesitation, this one. At the same time, a playful smile appeared on his face. He looked at Lin Sun and said, Monk, it's your turn. Lin Sun stood there with a serious look on his face, but he couldn't make a decision for a long time. He looked hesitant. This made everyone more certain that this monk was destined to be slaughtered. He was obviously a novice. After so long, he still hadn't chosen a meteorite. Monk, hurry up. Someone was getting impatient from waiting and started to urge him. Monk, can you do it or not? Why don't I help you choose a meteorite? Someone jeered, full of ridicule. Haha, the monk is so anxious that he's sweating. Someone noticed that a layer of sweat had appeared on Lin Sun's forehead and couldn't help but laugh. Nangong Shui and the others were very confident. Today, this fat sheep was destined to be unable to run away. This one. Lin soon gritted his teeth and chose a meteorite. He pretended to sigh with a worried expression. When they saw the meteorite he chose, many people couldn't help but have a strange look on their faces. That piece of star remains meteor seemed to be dazzling and extraordinary, but in the eyes of a connoisseur, it was a piece of inferior quality. The surface of the meteorite was broken and there were many small holes. Not to mention valuable treasures, it was very likely that there wouldn't be any treasures. This monk was really unlucky. For a moment, they couldn't help but look at Lin Sun with pity. They were afraid that he wouldn't be able to escape from this slaughter.